Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 5 true hauntings witnessed deep inside old cemeteries at night, we step into the places most people avoid even in daylight. Those forgotten burial grounds where the cold air feels heavier and the darkness clings to every stone. These aren't legends. These aren't campfire tales. These are real encounters. Moments witnessed by people who walked into a cemetery after sunset and discovered they were not alone. Every account you're about to hear has been retold by someone who felt the ground stir beneath them, who saw shadows move where no shadows should be, who realized the dead don't always lie quiet. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers step into the darkness, listen to these stories, and disappear without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the channel. Become part of the night. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's an old cemetery near your town that gives you that uneasy feeling, the kind that makes you walk just a little faster past its gates, type its name below. Because when darkness settles between the headstones, not everything lying there stays still. Kill the lights. Silence the world. Take a deep breath and let us begin. My name's Tyler Briggs. I'm from Pine Valley, just outside Macon in Georgia, and I work as a stock kid and cart pusher at the Food Lion off the highway, and I am sitting in my car by the cemetery gate right now, and my hands will not stop shaking. Man, so I'm just going to say this straight. Before I change my mind again, today started stupid normal. I got up late because my alarm on my phone only vibrated and didn't ring, and I slept through it with the phone under my pillow. My mom banged on my door at 9 and yelled that I was going to lose my job if I kept acting like I was still in school. I threw on the same black hoodie I always wear, the one with the little grease stain on the front from when I dropped a fry basket at work last year, and a pair of jeans that are getting white at the knees from always kneeling to pull boxes from the bottom shelves. Breakfast was the usual. 2 pieces of toast with too much margarine because we ran out of real butter, and instant coffee that never tastes right, no matter how much sugar I put in it. The TV was on in the living room, some daytime talk show with the volume low, and my mom was sitting at the table doing one of those word search books she buys from the dollar store. I checked the time on the microwave, 9:42, and checked my phone, 9:39. And I remember thinking that one of them was wrong, but it did not matter because I had to be at work by 11. I was halfway out the door when my mom said without looking up, "You going to see your grandma today, or you forgetting again?" It took me a second to realize the date. December 12. I always go out to Pine Valley Cemetery for her on that day. Every year. Since the year she died. I told Mom I'd go after my shift, that I would take some flowers. And she said, "Take the fake ones in the closet. The real ones just get eaten up by the deer out there." I grabbed my name tag off the counter. The one that just says TYLER in cheap black print, and my car keys. And I remember my hand hovering for a second over the plastic flowers, red and white ones on a green stem with a little bit of dust on them, and I thought, I'll get them later. No big deal. Listen, I need you to remember that part, because that's the last thing all day that made any sense when I look back. Work was boring. I clocked in at 10:56 because the manager likes it when we are eager and early. His word, not mine. And I went straight to the back to break down cardboard and bring out the new shipment of canned soup. It smelled like bleach and old produce back there, same as always. I stocked shelves, pushed carts, showed an old lady where the sugar was, even though she walked past it twice, got yelled at because one of the price tags on the end cap was wrong. I ate my lunch in the break room, leftover spaghetti in a plastic container that still smelled faintly like the dish soap. At 4, I checked my phone, and there were 3 messages in the family group chat. My aunt reminding everyone it was Grandma's day. My cousin posting a picture of the grave from last year. My mom saying she hoped somebody would go out there because she can't walk that hill anymore. I replied with a thumbs up and said I'd go after work. I swear to God that was my plan. I was not thinking about anything weird. It was just something I do every December, like a chore, like taking the trash out to the curb. I clocked out at 7:03 because the last customer would not stop asking about the difference between two brands of cat food. And then I stood outside the sliding doors for a second, debating if I should go home first and change or just head straight to the cemetery. The sky was already dark, that early winter dark where you can still see a bit of blue behind everything, and I could see my breath when I exhaled. I told myself if I went home I would end up on the couch and not get back up, so I got in my car, this beat-up silver Civic with a crack running across the windshield from a rock that hit it last summer. And I started driving up the 2-lane road that leads out to Pine Valley Cemetery. No music. I just let the heater make that clicking noise it makes before it actually gets warm and listen to the tires on the pavement. It takes maybe 15 minutes from the store. You pass the feed supply place, then the little Mexican restaurant with the faded sign, then the trailer park, then the road starts to curve and climb a bit, and there is a wooden sign on the right that says PIEE Valley Cemetery in white letters that are peeling off. I have seen that sign more times than I can count. I pulled in like normal, the tires crunching on the gravel, and I remember thinking there were fewer cars than usual for December. Some years there are a few families out there with candles. This time it was just empty, or I thought it was. The cemetery in Pine Valley is small, kind of on a hill, but not the nice kind of hill you see on postcards. The ground is uneven, and if you don't watch your step, you'll twist your ankle on the way up. Some of the headstones lean, old ones with names you can't read unless you scrub the lichen away. There are plastic flowers in a lot of the vases, faded from red to pink, sometimes tipped over by the wind. At the far back, there is a line of newer stones, white granite mostly, and that is where my grandma is. The gate was open when I pulled in. That's normal during the day. The weird part is that I checked the time on my phone when I parked, and it said 7:21. And the sky looked like it does around 9, and I remember thinking that it got dark too fast, but I blamed the clouds. I grabbed the plastic flowers from the passenger seat, the ones I remembered to throw in the car at the last second when I left the store, and I shut the door, and the sound echoed way too loud in the cold air. I walked up the path, past the older stones, past the little fenced-off section where they bury the babies, and I went to my grandma's row. I have walked that exact path so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. That is why I noticed right away that something was off. Her stone is supposed to be right in the middle of a straight line of 3. Hers, then Mr. Collins, who died the year after her, then an empty space where they keep saying they will put another stone and never do. But tonight the line was crooked. Not a little. Not like the ground had settled, but like someone had taken the stones and turned them just a few degrees out of line. So if you stood at the head of the row and looked down, it made a slight curve. I stopped. I thought maybe I was imagining it. I put the flowers down on her stone, on the little flat base at the bottom where I always set them, and even the base looked wrong. It looked like it was nearer the grass edge than it should be. I said, "Hey, Grandma," under my breath, like I always do, and my voice sounded small. I checked the dates on her stone, like I do every year, even though I know them by heart. June 1947 to December 2015. The words were the same, but the numbers seemed sharper, like they had just been carved yesterday. I told myself they must have cleaned it. I stood there a minute, feeling stupid for thinking anything weird. Then I looked up again, and I noticed the Collins stone next to hers. The date of death on his stone had always kind of stuck in my head because he died on my birthday, different year, but same day and month, July 3. I remember that because my mom used to talk about how she heard the news on the same day we were cutting cake. So when I looked at his stone and saw July 5 for the first time, that is when that cold feeling hit my chest, like somebody poured ice water right down the middle of me. Man, I am telling you, I stared at that number for a long time, July 5. I wiped at the stone with my sleeve in case some dirt was on it, making it look like a 5. It was carved clean. I pulled my phone out and opened the old picture my cousin posted in the group chat, the one from last year, and I zoomed in on the line of stones. In the picture, his date was July 3. I checked it twice. My phone said, 7:26. I checked the stone again. July 5. I told myself I was mixing it up, maybe remembering wrong, even though I had the proof in my hand. I told myself sometimes the mind fills things in. I tried to laugh it off, and it came out as this weak little sound that did not sound like me. I put the flowers back in place because my hands had started to move them around without me realizing, like I was trying to straighten something that would not straighten. I checked the line of stones again, and I swear the curve was more obvious than it had been when I walked up. I backed up a few steps to see the row from farther away. The ground under my left foot felt soft, softer than it should be for December when it hasn't rained for a week. I looked down and saw the dirt just slightly sagging around my shoe, like it wanted to take the shape of it. I jerked my foot back and almost fell. That was the first time I thought about leaving. I should have. I started walking back toward the car, past the baby section, past the older stones, and halfway down I stopped and turned around to look at Grandma's row one more time because something in my chest said you better check again. When I turned and looked up the hill, the row was straight, dead straight, all the stones in a perfect line. And from where I was, from that angle, Grandma's stone looked like it was leaning just a tiny bit toward the path. My phone buzzed. I checked it, and it was a message from my aunt saying, "Did you make it out there yet? It gets dark early. Don't go after night." The time said 7:29. I was standing there in the dark, staring up at the straight row, feeling like an idiot. I typed back, "Yeah, I'm here now. It's fine." And I shoved the phone in my pocket. I don't know why I did what I did next. Man, I swear to God, if I had just gotten in the car and driven home, I would probably be sleeping right now instead of sitting here in the parking lot shaking. I told myself I'd go back up and get a closer look, maybe take a new picture and send it to the group chat, something dumb like that. I walked back up the hill. My breath sounded loud in my ears. The plastic flowers around some of the stones rattled a little, a tiny bit of wind, but not enough to explain the way the sound seemed to come from different directions every time. I tried to step in the same places I had stepped before because that soft spot had freaked me out. When I reached my grandma's stone again, the curve was back. Colin's stone tilted just slightly. Not enough that you could say for sure, just enough that it made your eyes hurt to look at it. The date on it was still July 5. I checked my cousin's picture again, July 3. I checked the picture date stamp. It said it was taken last December, same day. All of that took maybe a minute. The sky above the cemetery felt close, like there were no stars, no moon, just a low gray ceiling. When I looked toward the road, I could see my car, the silver reflecting a tiny bit of the streetlight from down the hill, but the gate looked farther away than it should have. I know that sounds stupid. I know distances don't just change, but that is the only way I can describe it. The road felt farther. The gate felt narrower. I started talking out loud then, just to hear a voice, even if it was mine. I told my grandma I was here, that I was sorry I missed the last few months. That work has been crazy. I told her Mom still talks to her picture in the hallway, and that Aunt Denise still cries when she makes her chicken and dumplings. I told her I brought the red and white flowers because those were her colors at the church socials. My voice sounded like it was being soaked up by the ground. I finished talking, and I looked away for maybe a second, just to wipe my nose, and when I looked back, the stone on the other side of her, the empty space that never had a stone, was occupied. I am telling you, it was empty when I walked up the first time. There was just a patch of grass, a little lower than the rest, like they might put something there someday. Now there was a headstone. Plain, gray, no flowers. My heart did this weird little double beat in my chest. I read the name. I am not going to say the full name out loud here because I don't want it in my mouth again, but the last name was Briggs. My last name. Below it was a first name I did not know. Under that, 2 dates. And I swear on everything they were blank the first second I looked. Just 2 lines. Then when I blinked, the dates were there. And the year on the second one was next year. Not this year. Next year. I stepped back so fast my heels slipped on the uneven dirt, and I had to throw my hand out to catch myself on my grandma's stone. The granite was warm. Not room temperature, Not cold like a stone sitting outside in December is supposed to feel. Warm, like it had a body behind it. I jerked my hand away. I said, "No, no," out loud. I said, "Dude, what is this?" To no one. I told myself someone must have been buried there recently with the same last name, because Briggs is not that uncommon. I told myself the blank dates were just my eyes playing tricks on me. Except the dates were not blank now. They were as sharp as the numbers on my grandma's stone. My phone vibrated again. I ignored it. The air around me felt thicker, not colder, just heavier, like it was full of something that did not want me there. I decided, then I was leaving. No more checking. No more looking twice. I turned to go, and the ground under both my feet shifted. Not like mud, not like slipping. It felt like standing on a mattress when someone else gets on, that slow sink, except it was dirt. I froze. I could hear something then. And I hate this part. Man, I hate remembering it. But it was there. It was this tiny grainy sound, like someone moving their hand through dry rice, but muffled, coming from under the ground. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. I told myself it was roots. I told myself it was some animal. I told myself anything I could think of, while my body knew it was none of those things. I took one step forward. The sound followed my foot, under the soil, like it was tracking me. I took another step, and it happened again. I tried to run, and my legs would not move right, like I was running in waist-high water. The headstones around me seemed closer than they had been a minute ago, like the rows had shifted in without me seeing them move. I know that sounds insane, but I swear they were not that close when I walked up. I could smell cut grass, even though there were no fresh clippings anywhere, and this faint chemical smell from the fake flowers. Somewhere, a plastic windmill on a kid's grave spun once and then stopped, no wind at all. I hit the main path, and I almost relaxed because the ground there is packed gravel, and it did feel more solid. I power walked down it, not quite running, because I did not want to trip and break my neck, telling myself that once I got to the car I could just drive away and laugh about how weird I was being. That is when the lights went out. Not all the way. It was like someone dimmed the sky. 1 second, I could see all the stone shapes around me. The tree line at the edge of the cemetery. The faint glow from a house down the hill. The next, everything was still there, but darker. Lower contrast, like someone had turned down a dimmer switch. And the only real light was this pale strip along the path ahead of me, as if the sky had decided that was the part I was allowed to see. My phone buzzed again and I yanked it out, ready to turn on the flashlight, and the lock screen lit up. The time said 3:1. I stopped. I had just checked it, and it was 7:29. It does not take over 7 hours to walk from the top of the hill to the middle path. The battery icon that had been at 70% when I got out of the car was now sitting at 12. Notifications had stacked up. Missed calls from my mom, messages from my aunt and cousin, even one from my manager, asking if I could cover the morning shift tomorrow. All of them had timestamps between 8 and midnight. None of them had come through while I was standing by my grandma's stone. That is what broke something in my head. Not the stone with my last name. Not the date that had not happened yet. The time loss. The way my phone said I had been up there for hours and I remembered maybe 20 minutes. I turned the flashlight on. The beam hit the path and the stones on either side, and everything looked off by just enough. Some stones that should have been taller looked shorter. Some that should have been simple rectangles now had curves, and when I tried to focus on any one of them, my eyes kept sliding away. I swept the light up toward Grandma's row. From where I was, halfway down the hill, I should have only been able to see the tops of the stones, but I could see the whole line clear, as if I was standing right in front of it. And they were moving. Man, I swear to God, they were moving. Not sliding across the ground like in a movie. They were rising and sinking very slowly, like something under the earth was breathing, and each stone was resting on a chest that lifted and fell. The ground around them looked like it was also shifting, not crumbling, just pulsing in the same rhythm. I could feel that rhythm in my feet even though I was way down the path. My knees almost gave out. I think I said no out loud again, just that one word, over and over. I shone the light away, toward the gate, but the beam stayed short, like it did not want to go that far. The sky above the cemetery felt lower now, almost pressing down. The little strip of road outside the gate, where you can usually see cars passing, was empty and darker than it should be with the streetlight. I took a step forward anyway, because what else was I supposed to do? The ground shook once, very lightly, like a truck had gone by, but no sound came with it. The gravel under my shoes made a crunch that did not echo right. I heard a voice then. It was my grandma's voice, or at least, that is what my brain called it first, because it used my name the way she used to, dragging out the first syllable. Ty. But it was coming from behind me, up the hill, from her row. I did not turn around at first. I froze. The voice called again, same tone she would use when I was little and had wandered too far in the store. Ty. Over here. Come on now. You're going to make me stand here all day. I knew, deep down, that she had never once in her life called me from a grave. She died in a hospital, and I was not even there. I was in the school cafeteria when Mom called. That voice did not belong here. I kept my eyes on the gate and I walked faster. The voice did not get louder or quieter. It stayed the same distance inside my ear, like it was leaning over my shoulder. Then another sound joined it, that same dry, grainy noise from under the soil. Except now, it had a pattern to it. Like shifting, like repositioning. Footsteps that were not footsteps. Gravel crunching where no one was walking. I could feel eyes on my back. Not one pair, a lot of them, all from different heights. Listen, I know the rules say no ghosts, with backstories and no demons, and I'm not saying what it was. I am just telling you what it felt like. It felt like every name on every stone had turned into a set of eyes, and they were all looking at me at once. My chest hurt. I could taste metal in my mouth like blood, but there was none. I started running then. I did not care about tripping. I ran down the path toward the gate and what I thought was my car. The flashlight beam bounced, hitting stones. Little sparks of reflected light off the plastic flower wrappers. Each time it flashed over a stone. For a split second, I thought I saw a different name on it. Not the name that belonged there. My own. My mom's. The lady from the store. People I barely knew. Then when the light left and came back, it was normal again. The gravel under my shoes did not sound like gravel anymore. It sounded like someone cracking their knuckles one by one in time with my footsteps. I made it to the bottom of the hill, and that is when I realized the gate was closed. When I pulled in, it had been open. I remember that clearly, the way my headlights showed the open space. Now both sides of the iron gate were shut, and the chain was wrapped around them, the lock hanging in the middle. There are no lights directly on the gate, just the glow from the street light farther down. So I had to shine my phone flashlight right at it. The metal looked wrong. It looked newer than it should, like it had just been painted. No rust at all. I grabbed the chain and yanked. It did not move. I rattled it so hard the links dug into my hands and the lock stayed solid. My car was on the other side, quiet, the little parking lot empty except for that one silver shape. I could see my reflection faintly in the driver's side window even though it was dark, and for a second, my reflection did not copy me. I raised my hand to wipe my face, and in the glass my hand stayed down. I dropped my arm, and then the reflection caught up, smearing all my features together and then snapping back into place. I fell back from the gate onto the gravel. My phone slipped from my hand, and the flashlight went out when it hit the ground. The world went dim, not fully black, but flat, like there were no lights anywhere, not even from the sky. Fingers numb. When I found it, and the screen came back on, the time said 3:07. My battery was at 5%. I was still inside the cemetery fence. I am telling you, I did not sit down for hours. I did not close my eyes and nap by mistake. I ran maybe 60 feet and tried a gate. That is it. But the night had eaten whole chunks of time. I stood up, and something had changed in the air. It felt crowded, not with people, exactly, but with attention. Like the silence itself was staring at me. Then the ground beneath me shifted again, but this time it was not the soft mattress feeling. It was a pull. Like the whole cemetery had taken a breath in, and I was not invited to leave. I heard something behind me. It was not footsteps. It was the sound of earth slumping off something, that soft slide when you dump a shovel of dirt. It came in sets, 3 in a row, pause, 3 more, closer. I told myself, do not turn around, man, just do not. There is nothing behind you until you make it real. But my body ignored that, and my shoulders twisted, and I looked up the hill toward Grandma's row again. The path seemed longer now, the hill steeper, but I could still see the row, clear as if I was standing right there. And I watched one of the stones, I could not tell which one, at first rise higher than the others. Not float, it was attached to the ground, but the ground under it bulged up, pushing it, then sank, and another did the same, and another, like a breathing pattern that had lost its rhythm. The dirt in front of my grandma's stone cracked a little line, just a hairline, and something pale pushed against it from below, like fingers under fabric. I do not know if it was really a hand. My brain calls it a hand, because that is the closest thing it knows, but it was not shaped exactly right. Too long in one place, too short in another. It pressed, and the dirt crumbled, and I heard that grainy sound louder. I did not wait to see more. I grabbed the chain on the gate again, and instead of pulling straight out, I yanked it up, hard, like I was trying to lift the whole thing. The lock shifted just enough that the bottom of the gate scraped open a couple inches, whining against the gravel. It should not have. The chain was still wrapped. There was no space. But the gate moved anyway. I shoved my foot through the gap, and then my shoulder, scraping skin off my arm, and I forced myself between the bars. For a second, my jacket caught on something, and I felt this tug at my back. Not just on the cloth, but on me, like somebody had hooked fingers into my spine. Then it let go, and I fell out onto the paved road outside. The moment I hit that asphalt, everything changed. The air felt thin again, easier to breathe. The street light down the road was bright like normal. I heard a truck in the distance, somebody taking the curve too fast, like they always do. Behind me, the cemetery was just a dark shape on the hill, the gate half open, the sign overhead creaking a little in the cold. I rolled onto my back, staring at the sky. Stars were there now. The moon was a thin line over the trees. My phone buzzed so hard in my pocket I thought it was going to break. I answered without looking, and my mom's voice came blasting through, crying and angry at the same time. Asking where I was, asking why I had not answered, saying they had been calling hospitals. I said, I am fine, I just lost track of time. I am sorry, over and over. She said, Tyler, it is 3 a.m. You left for the cemetery before 8. I sat up and looked at my car. It was not parked where I left it. It was about 20 feet farther down the shoulder, facing the wrong way. Like someone had backed it out and straightened it while I was gone. The driver's side door was locked. My keys were in my pocket. I did not remember locking it. I did not remember moving it. I told my mom I was coming home. And I hung up because my battery was at 1% and I needed the GPS if anything else went wrong. When I stood up, my legs almost gave out. My jeans were covered in dirt from the knees down, like I had been kneeling or lying on the ground a lot longer than I remembered. There was soil under my fingernails, even though I had not dug anything. I got in the car, started it, and for a second the engine just clicked, like the battery was dead. Then it roared to life like nothing was wrong. The clock on the dashboard said 10:04. I did not trust it. I drove home with the radio turned all the way up to some late-night station just so I would hear human voices. Any voices, saying normal things like traffic reports and weather. The whole time I was driving, I would hit certain stretches of road, and for a few seconds, I could not remember what was supposed to be on either side. There is usually a gas station on that corner, right, or a mailbox, or a farmhouse. For a second or two, those things would feel optional, like the road could lead anywhere. When I got home, Mom was waiting on the porch in her robe, and she grabbed me and hugged me so hard I could not breathe. She kept saying, "Where did you go? Why didn't you answer?" We almost called the sheriff. I told her I fell asleep in the car at the cemetery, that my phone died. It was easier than saying the other thing. She made me come inside. I went to the bathroom to wash my hands, and when I turned on the light, I saw dirt on my neck, right under my jaw, in a smudge like somebody had cupped a hand there and pulled. I scrubbed it until the skin was red. That was 3 nights ago. I did not go to work the next day. I told them I was sick. That is not a complete lie. I have not slept more than an hour at a time since. Every time I close my eyes, I see that row of stones rising and sinking, that new stone sliding into place without being carried, the dates carving themselves from nothing. Today, I thought maybe it would get better if I went back in the daytime, just to prove to myself everything was normal. I know that sounds stupid after everything I just said, but I needed to see it in the sun. So I waited until lunch and I drove out again. The sky was clear, bright blue, the way it never is at night. The sign over the cemetery was peeling like normal. The gate was propped open with a rock. There were 2 other cars in the lot. A woman with a stroller was leaving as I walked up and she nodded at me, like nothing was wrong. I walked up the hill, heart pounding, expecting every step for the ground to shift under me, but it didn't. The dirt was hard. The plastic flowers rattled in a regular way when the breeze hit them. Birds were chirping in the trees. I got to Grandma's row, and I stopped so fast I almost tripped over my own feet. The line of stones was straight, perfectly aligned. Grandma's stone in the center, Colin's on one side, the empty grass patch on the other. No new stone, no Briggs. The date on Colin's stone was July 3 again. I checked my cousin's picture, and it matched. For a second, I seriously thought that I had dreamed the entire thing, that I had sat in my car the other night and fallen asleep and let my brain scare itself. Then I looked at the base of Grandma's stone where I had set the flowers. The red and white flowers from the other night were there, but they looked older than 3 days. The plastic was dirty and faded, and there was a thin line of dust on the petals like they had been there for months. Next to them was a little track in the dirt, a groove that ran from the base of her stone to the patch of grass where the empty space was, like someone had dragged something heavy but narrow between them. I knelt down to look closer and saw that line was deeper, closer to the empty patch, like more weight had settled there. When I reached out to touch the dirt, my finger landed in a small depression. It fit my fingertip exactly, and when I pressed, it felt like sliding into a fingerprint that matched mine. I jerked my hand back so fast, I fell onto the stone behind me. I heard somebody behind me say, "You all right, son?" And I turned to see the groundskeeper standing there. Old guy in a green jacket with the cemetery logo. I said, "Yeah, I am fine," and it came out too loud. He squinted at me and then at the ground. He said, "You family of hers," nodding at my grandma's stone. I said, "Yeah, I am her grandson." He nodded again like that made sense. Then he said, "Funny thing about this row, it keeps settling strange. Every time I come up here, the level looks a little off." I tried to laugh. I asked if that was normal. He shrugged and said, "Dirt moves, son, that is what it does." Then he said, without me asking, "Sometimes you just have to accept that. Dirt moves. Stones move. We just put them where the families ask, and the ground does what it wants." The way he said it made the back of my neck prickle. I asked him if they had buried anyone new in this row recently, anyone with my last name. He shook his head, said not that I recall, and I would remember that. We do not get many Briggs out here. I thanked him, and he walked away, whistling some tune that sounded off by one note. I stood there, a long time after he left, staring at the empty patch where the stone had been or had not been, depending on whether I trusted my own memory. When I finally walked back to my car, I counted my steps. It took 24 to reach the gate. The night it happened, it might as well have been a mile. Now I am back here, in the same car, parked just outside the gate, because I could not make myself pull in. It is just after 3 in the morning again. I checked the time 3 different ways. My phone, the car clock, the watch my grandma gave me on my 13th birthday that I dug out of my drawer tonight, even though the battery is almost dead. All of them say the same time. The gate is closed right now. I can see the lock. Rusty like it always used to be. Not shiny like that night. The road is quiet, except for the occasional truck. I am talking into my phone like some crazy person because I need this out of me. I need it somewhere else, so maybe it will stop looping in my head. Listen, man, I am not asking you to believe me. You were not there. You do not know how the ground felt under my feet, or how wrong the sky looked, or how it feels to see your own last name on a stone that vanishes in daylight. But I need you to understand one thing. I am not going back in there again. I told my mom I would not go to any more funerals. I told my aunt if she wants someone to put flowers on Grandma's grave, she can ask my cousin, because I am done. I drive a different way to work now, even though it takes 10 extra minutes, so I do not have to pass the sign. When I ride with someone else and we go near a cemetery, any cemetery, I find some excuse to look at my phone so I do not have to see the rows of stones out the window in case any of them decide to shift while I am looking. I turned off the vibration on my phone because sometimes when it buzzes in my pocket it feels like that pull from the ground again. I keep waking up with dirt under my fingernails, even though I wash my hands before bed. I do not know what really happened that night. I do not know if time actually folded or if my mind is broken. I do not know if there is still a stone up there with my name on it, waiting to slide back into place when the dates line up. What I do know is this. I will drive the long way around for the rest of my life if I have to. I will add 20 minutes to every trip. I will go out of my way. I will be late for everything, just so I do not have to see headstones from the road. Because once you have watched them move, once you have felt the ground under them breathe, you cannot see them as just markers anymore. You see them as lids. And you never really know which one is getting ready to open. My name's Danielle Mercer. I'm from outside Red Clay, Oklahoma. And I work as a long-haul truck driver hauling lumber and farm equipment, and I keep telling myself that what happened out there on County Road 12 was just me being tired and jumpy. But I am sitting in my cab right now, in a gas station parking lot, facing away from the little cemetery behind it, because I cannot stand seeing headstones anymore. And my hands are shaking so bad, the coffee keeps sloshing out of the cup, and if I do not get this out of my head and say it straight, man, I feel like it is going to come back in a way I cannot drive away from. So just listen, because I swear to God this happened exactly like I am about to tell you. With nothing added and nothing made pretty, just what went wrong that night, by Red Clay Memorial. That day started normal. That is the worst part. There was nothing special. No weird feeling when I woke up. No dreams, nothing, just another run on a route I had done so many times I could see it with my eyes shut. And maybe that is part of the problem too, because routine makes you blind, you know. It makes you think you know every mile of road, every gas station, every tree line. And then one night, the road shows you something you never saw, and you realize maybe it was there the whole time. I woke up in the sleeper around 9 in the morning at a truck stop outside Amarillo, my back stiff from the bunk, and the first thing I remember thinking was that my shirt smelled like fryer grease and cheap coffee because I had worn it the day before inside the diner. And I told myself I would change it as soon as I fueled up. But I did not. I just pulled it back on. Gray work shirt with my name patch a little crooked, a faint dark ring on the stomach from where I had spilled chili a couple weeks back that never quite washed out. And I remember staring at that stain while I brushed my teeth in the gas station bathroom, thinking I should buy a new shirt. But money has been tight and the stain was not hurting anyone. It was just there, like most things you get used to. I had 2 eggs and toast and bacon at the counter, same as always, coffee black with too much sugar. And the waitress called me hun and asked where I was headed, and I told her Red Clay, hauling a flatbed of fence posts and some steel parts for a farm supply place that sits right off the highway. And she said something about her cousin living near there, and then she went to refill another guy's cup, and the day just kept moving forward like nothing was waiting on the other end. Dispatch pinged me at 10:13. I remember the time because I flicked my phone on to check the weather too, and it showed clear skies all day. Cold but clear. High barely hitting 40. No rain, no storms, just that flat winter light you get out there, where everything looks washed out and the shadows are thin, even at noon. I rolled out around 10:30, fueled up, checked the straps on the load, did my walk around, tapped each tire like I always do, listening for the dull sound that means trouble, and every tire answered me the same way they always do, solid and boring. I got on the interstate, then onto smaller roads, watched the miles tick by, listened to a talk radio show about college ball for a while, then switched to some old country songs, because the host would not stop yelling, and everything just blurred into that long, straight, gray ribbon of pavement, with dead grass and fence lines and bare trees slicing the horizon. Around 2 or so, I stopped at a rest area, used the bathroom, bought a soda, checked my logbook, and I remember sitting in the cab for a minute, thinking about my ex and how I still have her photo tucked in the sun visor, even though I keep telling myself I am going to throw it away, and that nothing about that day felt like a turning point. It was just more of the same. I got to Red Clay around 4, dropped off the load, signed the paperwork, made small talk with the guy at the dock who complained about his knees and said they were trying to get him to retire, and then I climbed back in the truck and sat there with the engine rumbling, looking at the clock on the dash and doing the math on my hours, and that is when I made the decision that kept me out there by the cemetery at 3 in the morning instead of finding a motel like a normal person. I had some time left on my clock, not enough to make it home, but enough to get a head start, and I hate wasting legal driving hours just sitting still, so I told myself I would push on a bit. Get closer to the next day's pickup, and find a quiet spot to park and sleep. And I remembered there was this wide shoulder near an old rural cemetery just off County Road 12, where a lot of drivers park for a few hours if the truck stops are full, and I had parked there once before in the daytime, just for a bathroom break, and it had seemed fine. Just some old stones on a low hill with a chain-link fence and a crooked wooden sign that said Red Clay Memorial Cemetery in faded white letters. Nothing dramatic, nothing that made the hair on my arms stand up. I told myself I would stop at the last gas station before turning onto that road, top off the tank, grab something to eat, maybe a packaged sandwich, and then just crash in the bunk for 6 or 7 hours and roll out at dawn. Easy. I reached that gas station around 8:30 in the evening, the sky already dark, air sharp when I stepped down from the cab, and the clerk had one of those small space heaters by his feet and a little radio playing soft music behind the counter, and we barely said a word to each other. I bought a turkey sandwich in plastic, a bag of chips, and another coffee, then stood outside for a minute, watching my breath fog and the way the headlights from passing cars hit the trees behind the station. Nothing felt wrong. I checked my phone again. It said 8:42. I opened the Maps app and saw the cemetery pull-off was about 30 minutes down the road, just a right turn, then a stretch of 2-lane where nobody drove much after dark except locals and trucks like mine. I remember thinking it would be quiet, that I would sleep better there than in some busy truck stop lot, and I sure as anything did not think about who else might be sharing that stretch of dirt and gravel. I started driving again, the coffee warming my hands, the cab finally getting to that steady temperature where you do not think about the cold anymore. Just the passing world outside the windshield. County Road 12 is one of those roads where your lights feel too small, no matter how bright they are, like they only punch a little hole in the dark, and the rest just presses in on you. On both sides there are fields, barbed wire fences, occasional lines of trees, and every now and then you see a mailbox with some family name painted on it, leaning a little, like it has been there since before you were born. I turned the radio down low and drove with that kind of half focus you get late in the day. Not asleep, but not fully wired either, just humming along. The first time I saw the cemetery that night, it was just a darker shape on the right, a rise in the ground with pale spots where the headstones caught my beams, and the sign flashed into view and then was gone, but I knew the pull-off was just past it. A little gravel apron that sloped up from the road. Enough room to ease the truck over without blocking anything. I slowed, put on the blinker even though there was no one behind me, and turned the wheel, feeling the tires crunch over the gravel as I brought the rig to a stop parallel to the fence, facing down the road. When I killed the headlights, it was like the whole world shrank. Just the soft glow from the dash and the faint orange from a streetlight way back by the highway, barely reaching us out there. The engine idled, humming under my feet, and I sat there for a second, just listening to it, and telling myself I would log my off-duty time at exactly 9 to keep the numbers neat. I checked my phone. It was 8:56. I scrolled through some messages, nothing new, then flicked open a video someone had sent earlier, but stopped it after a few seconds, because my eyes hurt. That dry, gritty feeling from staring at the road all day, and I set the phone face down on the passenger seat. I remember thinking I should walk around the truck one more time before bed, check the straps, stretch my legs, maybe use the tree line as a restroom since there were no facilities out there. It was not like I had never done that before, so I pulled the air brake, turned off the engine, and when the silence fell, it felt heavy, thicker than it should. With no highway noise, no cars passing, just that blanket quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. I opened the driver door and climbed down. The cold hit me hard then, the kind that gets into your fingers fast, and I zipped my jacket up and shoved my hands in the pockets. I could smell damp earth and that faint sweet plastic scent from fake flowers, which I thought was just my imagination at first. But when I stepped forward a bit and looked to my right through the chain-link fence, I saw the rows of headstones on the hill, some with bouquets in front of them, some real. Some those faded fake ones that rattle on windy days. Only, it was not windy. The trees lining the far edge of the cemetery were still, branches barely moving. My breath rose in little clouds as I walked along the side of the truck, boots crunching on gravel. The metal of the trailer ticked softly as it cooled, and I remember feeling tired but not scared. Just that mild unease you get when you are alone somewhere, with a lot of dark and a lot of places for animals to hide. I went around the back, checked the load, tugged on a strap out of habit, then started walking toward the end of the gravel, where it met the ditch and the start of the fence, thinking I would just step off the road a bit. That is when I saw the movement up the slope, between the stones. At first I thought it was my eyes playing tricks because of the contrast between the dark ground and the lighter stones. But then it resolved into the shape of a person, a man standing near a big tree about halfway up the rise, his outline catching just enough of the thin moonlight to look real. He had what looked like denim overalls on, the kind my grandfather used to wear working on tractors, and a cap pulled down low. His back was to me, shoulders bent, and his arms moved in this slow, steady rhythm, up and down, like he was digging. I could see the arc of something in his hands, a long handle, and then the faint lighter patch at the end where the metal of the shovel should be, rising and falling. I thought, all right, groundskeeper, maybe someone working late, maybe there was a funeral the next day, and he was behind schedule. It was weird, sure, 3 a.m, kind of work in the middle of the night, but it was barely past 9 then, and I told myself maybe he liked doing it in the evening when it was cooler and no one was around. Except I knew it was not 9 anymore because I felt like I had been walking around longer than that, and when I glanced at my watch, it said 2:57. I froze right there by the side of the truck with my hand on the cold metal of the trailer, staring at that time like it was wrong, like the numbers on the screen had glitched. I took my phone out, thinking maybe my watch was off. The phone said 2:57 too, with a little battery icon, almost dead, even though I was sure it had been over half charged when I parked. I tried to remember what I had been doing between stepping out of the cab and seeing the man on the hill, and there was just this blank, like I had skipped a few scenes in a movie and was trying to piece it together from context. I stood there, snow of my breath puffing out in front of me, heart starting to beat faster, and I looked back up at the hill and the man in the overalls. He was still digging, same motion, same slow lift and drop of the handle, like a metronome. The sound reached me then, a faint metal scrape and a thud, over and over, but it did not quite match the movement. It was like the shovel was hitting something that was not there, or hitting dirt that was not on the surface. I told myself maybe I had dozed off in the cab and lost hours, that I was more tired than I thought, and now I was half awake and my head was not right. But my muscles remembered climbing down from the seat, walking around, feeling the cold on my face, so it did not make sense. None of it did. My first instinct should have been to get back in the truck and lock the door and pretend I had not seen anything. But I am stupid about some things, and one of those is leaving unknowns alone. I get hung up on them. They sit in my head and scratch at the inside of my skull until I do something. I told myself maybe the guy needed help. Maybe he had a schedule to keep. Or maybe he was some older groundskeeper who should not be out here alone at this hour, lifting dirt. So I cupped my hands around my mouth and called up the hill, "Hey man, you good up there? You need a hand?" And my voice sounded too loud, like it was bouncing off the stones and coming back thinner. The guy did not react. The shovel kept rising and falling in that same slow arc. I walked closer to the fence, boots sliding a little on the gravel as it gave way to the packed dirt of the ditch. I could see more details now. The tree he stood under was big and old, branches twisting out above him, and from one of the main limbs hung a rope, just a single rope tied in a loop at the end, swaying slightly like there was a breeze, but the grass at the base of the tree was still. The noose shape made my throat tighten. I hate that kind of thing. I thought maybe it was some leftover from a Halloween display, or some idiot local kids trying to scare each other. The man in the overalls stood right under that rope, his feet near a rectangle of darker ground where the grave he was digging seemed to be. Only when I squinted, I could not actually see a pile of dirt forming anywhere. The shovel went down, the shovel came up, but the ground around him did not change. No mound, no trench, just that rectangular shadow like someone had drawn the outline of a grave with a darker pencil. I called out again, a little louder. "Hey man, everything all right? You out here by yourself?" And still nothing. No turn of the head, no sign he even heard me. The sound of the shovel was there though, a little louder now. Metal on something, a dull bite and drag. It made the hair on my arms lift. I did something I still do not understand. I unlatched the gate. It was one of those simple chain-link gates with a loop of chain and a hook, not locked, just hanging there. The metal was cold on my fingers, and when it clinked, the sound seemed too sharp, echoing up the hill. For a second I thought maybe that would get his attention, that he would stop and look, but he kept moving the same way. Up, down, scrape, thud, like he was following a pattern written somewhere I could not see. I stepped inside. I should not have, and I know that now, but I did. The ground was firmer under my boots, with patches of old grass and bare spots where the dirt showed through, and the headstones rose around me in uneven lines, some leaning, some cracked, names half worn away, dates from the 50s, the 40s, one I passed from 1918 that made me think about flu and war and all the ways people end up under stone. I walked up the little path between the rows, my breath sounding too loud in my ears, and every few steps I told myself I would stop and turn around, that this was none of my business, but I did not stop. I kept going toward that tree and the man in the overalls because something about the way he moved kept bothering me. When you watch someone work, there are little shifts, little pauses, but he had none. It was like watching the arm of a machine, perfectly even. As I got closer, maybe 20 feet away, I could start to see more, but it did not help. His clothes were dirty in a general way, like he had been working all day. Dark stains on the knees and lower legs. His boots caked with something that might have been mud. The brim of his cap shadowed his face. The shovel blade looked clean, no soil sticking to it. No clumps, just dark metal catching a bit of moonlight each time it rose. The sound, though, kept saying it was hitting something. A rhythmic impact with a little grind after, like it bit into rock or packed earth. I stopped there and called again, "Sir? You all right? You want a hand or anything?" It is late to be out here. And my voice did this little shake at the end I did not mean for it to. Still, nothing. The shovel came up. The shovel went down. The rope above him swayed a little more, like it was moving in a different wind than the rest of the world. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry, and stepped closer, closing the distance to maybe 10 feet. I saw then that the rectangle at his feet was not actually disturbed soil. It was darker because it was wet. At least that is what I thought at first, that maybe there had been rain earlier and the water had collected there. But the rest of the ground did not look wet. And when the shovel came down, it did not splash. It just sank through the darkness like it was not there at all. I felt something in my chest pull tight. I said, "Sir," and my voice cracked. "You hear me?" And then, "Man, I swear to God, are you okay?" And right after I said that, the shovel stopped. It froze midway up, handle at an angle, blade hovering above that dark rectangle, not wobbling, not shifting like something with weight should. The man in the overalls stood still too, shoulders squared now, head slightly turned. I felt every muscle in my body lock up. For a second, nothing moved except that rope above him, swinging very gently side to side. Then he spoke. He did not turn all the way around, not yet, but his head angled just enough that I could see the lower half of his face in the shadow of the cap, and he said, in this dry, dusty voice that sounded like it had not been used in years, "You took your time." And the way he said it made my stomach drop, because it was not a question and it was not addressed to a stranger asking if he needed help. It was like he had been standing there, waiting for one specific person, and I had finally shown up late to my own appointment. I tried to laugh it off, this thin, nervous sound that did not sound like me, and I said, "Sorry, man, I just pulled over. I saw you out here, thought maybe you needed a hand, or maybe you were in some kind of trouble," and I took another step forward out of habit, like I was approaching a customer or another driver, and the closer I got, the colder the air felt. Not just normal night cold, but this sharp drop, like stepping into the freezer section at the store. I could see the edge of the dark patch at his feet more clearly now. It was not water. It was more like a shadow that had gotten too dense, too solid, and the shovel blade hung there right above it, unmoving. I realized his hands were not clenched around the handle the way they should be after repetition. They just rested there, fingers loose, like the tool was holding itself in place. I said, "You work here, grounds crew," and he gave this little sound that might have been a laugh but had no humor in it, just air pushing past something. He said, "I stay here," and the words did something bad to my thoughts, like they did not fit right. Before I could frame another question, before I could back away, he finished turning toward me. I wish I could tell you he had no face or something dramatic like that, but it was worse, because he had just enough of one left to make it clear that at some point it might have looked like mine or any other man's. His skin was the color of the dirt around us, that reddish-brown clay they named the town for, and it looked dry, like it would crumble if you touched it. Where his eyes should have been, there were just these deep hollows. Not empty, though. That is the thing, because something moved in there, slow and steady like dry soil, shifting down the sides of a hole. As I watched, a little trickle of that dirt slid out from one socket and fell down his cheek in a straight line, leaving no mark. His mouth was a crack that opened just enough to show the shape of teeth underneath, but they were dark too. Not rotten, just stained with the same red. I know how this sounds, like something from a movie, but there was nothing grand about it. No big jump, just this quiet wrongness that hit me harder than any scream could. I could not move. My legs would not listen. He looked at me with those hollow places, like he saw me just fine, and tilted his head a fraction to one side. "You are late," he said, and hearing it fully, that rasp like shovels on hard ground made me want to throw up. I tried to say I was just passing through, that I was a driver, that I had stopped to rest, but the words came out jumbled. Something like, "I just pulled over. I am on my way." I do not belong here, and the last part sounded like I was begging. He raised one hand from the shovel handle, then, slow and smooth, and for a second, I thought he was going to point at me. But instead, he gestured slightly toward the dark rectangle at his feet, like a host showing a guest to their table. "It is ready," he said. His voice had no anger in it. That almost made it worse. It was just a statement. I shook my head hard, finally finding some control in my body, and took a step back. Then another. My heel brushed against something, and I glanced down. There was a headstone right behind me that I had not noticed approaching, low and plain, and my boot had scuffed the edge. The name on it was worn but still readable. I saw the letters, and my brain did this lurch. It said Mercer, same spelling as mine. The first name was gone, smoothed away. Just a faint curve where a letter used to be, but the last name was clear, dates half erased. I know it is not a rare name. I know there could be other Mercers buried anywhere. But in that moment, with the man of clay and dirt staring at me and that empty rectangle on the ground, it felt like the world had shrunk to just me and that stone. I jerked my foot away like the granite was hot. I said, "No, wrong guy. I do not live here. I am just driving through. Man, I swear to God." And I turned, ready to run back down the slope, back to the truck, to slam the door and fight with the keys and maybe grind the starter, but try anyway. But something stopped me. The path I had walked up through the stones was not there the way I remembered it. The rows seemed closer together, the gaps narrower, like the ground had shifted while I was watching the gravedigger. I forced myself between two markers, shoulder-brushing cold stone, and almost stumbled as the ground under my boots dipped unexpectedly. I looked down and saw that my footprints were there already, not just behind me where they should have been, but ahead, pressed into the thin dust and grass leading up toward the tree. It was like I had walked this route more than once, over and over, but I only remembered coming up once. For a second, everything in my vision narrowed around those prints. Boot tread clear, the pattern I recognized as my own, and I had this awful thought that I had been going up and down this hill all night, maybe for hours, while time slipped and reset, and every time I thought I was making a new choice, I was just sinking deeper into a rut I could not see. I snapped my head up, breathing fast, heart punching at my ribs, and the man, the gravedigger, was watching me still. Shovel now, resting with the handle straight up, blade planted at the edge of that dark rectangle like a marker. The rope above him had gone almost still, only the slightest twitch now. He did not move to block my way. He did not move at all. He just waited. That is what makes me shake now even more than the way he looked, the waiting. Like he had all the time in the world, and I was the one running late to something that had no end time listed. I forced my legs to go, one step, then another, ignoring the strange weave of the rows, ignoring the way the air felt thicker, like walking through smoke that did not smell. I kept my eyes on the gate down at the bottom because I needed some solid point to aim at. Every time my gaze flicked sideways, I saw little wrong details. A date on a stone that said someone had died next year. A bouquet of fake flowers that rattled gently even though there was still no wind, their plastic petals tapping against each other like teeth. A stone with no name, just a blank space. But when I glanced back, it had something carved that I could not quite read in the dim light. Letters that seemed to rearrange themselves. I stopped doing that. I stopped looking. I put everything into reaching that gate. It felt impossibly far, like the hill stretched under me. But finally my hand closed around the cold metal post. I shoved it open so hard it clanged and stumbled out onto the gravel, sucking in air like I had been underwater. For a second, I just stood there, leaning on the gate. Then I forced myself to do one last thing. I turned back to look up the hill. Part of me hoped, really hoped, that I would see nothing, that the man and the dark rectangle and the rope were all some sleep-deprived vision, but they were still there. He was turned away again now, back to me, shoulders bent, arms moving steadily as he dug. The shovel rose and fell in that same slow pattern. The rope swayed above him, gentle, side to side, not matching any breeze I could feel. The sound of metal on whatever he was digging in reached me as faint, regular beats. I realized then that it matched my heartbeat. I did not call out again. I did not ask any questions. I backed away from the fence, never turning my back on that hill until I had my hand on the truck door. When I finally climbed up and slammed it shut, the cab felt too small, too close, but it was something with locks and glass, and that had to count for something. My hands fumbled the keys, and I messed up the ignition twice before the engine caught. When it did, the sound made my eyes sting with relief. I turned the headlights on, and for a second, they flared over the fence and up the hill, catching the tree, the rope, the faint form of the man in overalls. The light did not touch him the way it should have. It seemed to slide around him, like he was deeper in the ground than everything else. I snapped my gaze away and focused on the road. The clock on the dash said 3:1. I put the truck in gear, eased it forward, tires crunching on gravel, and pulled back onto the asphalt, not looking in the mirrors until the cemetery was swallowed behind me by the dark. I drove without the radio on. I did not want any noise that I was not making. My hands were still shaking on the wheel, and I kept glancing at the clock, expecting it to jump or slide backward. But it moved normally now, minute by minute. After a while, the highway came back, the familiar glow of signs and the occasional sweep of other headlights. The world felt real again, solid, but that did not loosen the knot in my chest. At the next gas station with lights and people and cameras, I pulled in. I must have looked bad because the cashier asked if I was sick. I said I was just tired and bought another coffee, but my hand shook so much when I lifted it that I had to set it down and use both hands. I went back out to the truck, sat in the driver's seat with the door locked and the engine off. And for the first time since I was a kid, I started to pray without really thinking about it, just words tumbling out under my breath, asking to not see that hill again, to not dream it, to not find myself back there without knowing how I got there. In the morning, when the sky was pale and the parking lot was full of other trucks and cars, I tried to convince myself it had been a waking nightmare, a stress thing. I told myself I should drive back past the cemetery in broad daylight, look at it, see nothing but stones and grass, and maybe some groundskeeper trailer out back. That would prove it, right. But when I checked my printed route sheet and thought about turning down County Road 12 again, my hands started trembling worse than they had the night before, and my throat closed up. I did not go back. I took the long way, added miles I did not have fuel money for, just to avoid that turn. Later that week, I saw a patrol car at a truck stop near Red Clay. The officer was grabbing coffee, and I heard him talking to the clerk about some kids getting caught drinking out by the cemetery and how they had spooked themselves because they swore they heard someone digging even though the place was empty when he checked. I did not interrupt. I did not ask questions. I paid for my stuff and left, heart pounding, ears ringing. I told myself it was just stories, that the kids had been drunk, that maybe he was exaggerating. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rope swaying above a man who did not stop moving until I called out, who looked at me with hollows full of shifting clay and said I was late like we had agreed on a time. I started changing my routes, requesting loads that sent me in different directions. The company grumbled, but I made up excuses about family, about preferring certain lanes. If there is a cemetery marked on the map near a place I have to stop now, I do not park there. I will drive tired to the next town. I will sleep sitting up in the driver's seat in a crowded lot. But I will not pull over on some quiet road next to a fence and a hill of stones. I cannot watch funerals on TV anymore. The sight of people standing around an open grave makes my skin crawl. I skip those scenes, turn the channel, get up, and walk out of the room if I am at someone else's place. My sister asked me to visit our father's grave last month. Said it would mean a lot to her, that enough time had passed. I told her the truck schedule had me out of state and I could not make it. That was a lie. I was back home that week, truck parked on the gravel beside my little rental. But I sat in the cab instead and stared at the steering wheel, because every time I thought about walking between rows of stones, my knees felt weak. I know how it sounds. I know people are going to say I was exhausted, that I nodded off and dreamed the whole thing, That I misread the times. That memory is funny like that. Maybe they are right. Maybe there is some medical explanation. Some mix of lack of sleep and too much caffeine and the quiet of that road. I could live with that. I would welcome it. But there are a couple of things I cannot shake. One is the tire tracks. A few days after, when I could stand to think about it, I pulled up my dash cam footage, the part that records the road in front. I wanted to see what the cemetery looked like when I pulled away, if anything showed up in the headlights that my mind twisted into something worse. Most of the video was just dark and the reflection of the beam on the fence. But there was this one frame, as I turned back onto the road, where the angle shifted just enough that you could see a slice of the hill and the ground near the tree. It was grainy as anything, but you could make out a long rectangular patch of darker shadow at the base of the trunk and a line of tire tracks in the dirt beyond the fence, like something heavy had turned off the road and driven straight up to that spot. They did not match my path. My truck had stayed outside the fence, parallel to it. These tracks were inside, starting from nowhere, stopping near that dark rectangle. I showed it to a buddy once, asked him what he saw without telling him what I thought. He frowned, leaned closer to the tiny screen, and said it looked like someone had driven in there. Maybe a pickup, maybe some farm vehicle, but there was no gate opening in that direction. He asked if the groundskeeper had another access road. I said I did not know. Then he handed me the phone back and told me I needed sleep. The other thing is my shirt. That gray work shirt with the chili stain, I still have it. I was going to throw it out after that night, but something stopped me. When I got back from that run, I noticed a new mark on it, down near the hem, a reddish smear that did not look like food or grease. I touched it, and the fabric felt stiffer there, like something had dried into it. I tried washing it 3 times. The mark faded a little, but never fully disappeared. It is not blood. I know what that looks like. And this is more like clay ground into the threads. That same red clay color as the soil out by Red Clay Memorial. I do not remember kneeling or falling or brushing against the ground hard enough to pick it up like that, but it is there, and when I press my fingers to it, I swear I can feel the slightest grit under the skin. I keep the shirt shoved in the back of my closet now. Sometimes I think I should set it on fire, but I am afraid of what that would mean. Like admitting something sealed itself into my life that night, and burning the shirt would not get rid of it, just make it angry. I know how that sounds too. I am not a superstitious man. I do not talk about demons or curses. I just know that since that night, every time I see a line of headstones from the road, no matter how far away, I get this pressure in my chest like someone is standing on it, and I find a way to look away, to stare at the dash, to check the mirrors, anything but those stones. If I have to pass a cemetery, I turn the radio up loud, like noise can drown out the memory of metal on unseen earth, and a voice like dry dirt saying I was late. I do not know who that man was, if he ever had a real name, if he was a memory of someone who used to dig graves there, or something older than that, tied to the red clay and the tree and that rope. I do not know if that rectangle was meant for me, or if I just happened to arrive at the wrong time, stepping into a shift that has been going on longer than anyone remembers. All I know is that he did not chase me. He did not cross the fence. He just went back to digging when I ran. Like he could afford to wait. Like he had waited before, and would wait again. Because whoever he is, he never left that cemetery, and never will. And if I ever make the mistake of pulling over on that road again, he will still be there, shovel rising and falling over a grave that is always ready and never filled. That is why I am talking into this phone in a gas station lot with my truck pointed away from the little patch of headstones behind the convenience store. That is why I pretend I lost the address of my father's grave when my sister texts. That is why I will take the long way every time from now on, no matter how many hours it adds. I am not late for anything there anymore. I am not showing up at all. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm from a little place outside Giddings, Texas, and I work as a night groundskeeper at Marigold Rest Cemetery. And I need you to listen to me because I am parked out here by the gate right now. My hands are shaking on the steering wheel, and I keep checking the rearview mirror, even though I know I am the only one in this truck, and I am trying to get this out before I lose the nerve again. I am not a writer. I am not doing this for attention. I am just trying to explain why I cannot step through that gate anymore. Why I cannot even look at a lantern the same way. Why I keep waking up with my fingernails full of dirt I do not remember touching. It was a regular day when it started, and that is the part that will not leave my head. I remember what I had for breakfast that morning, because it was the same thing I always have. 2 fried eggs and toast and coffee that tastes burned, and I remember the way the plate looked in the sink when I left the house, just sitting there in the cold water because I told myself I would wash it after my shift. I remember the shirt I put on. It is the dark green work shirt with my name patch sewn over the pocket. There is a stain on the left sleeve from when I spilled trimmer gas on it in the summer, and no matter how many times I wash it, that spot stays a little darker than the rest. I buttoned it up, put on my work boots that always have a little bit of grass and sand stuck in the treads, grabbed my keys and my lunch, and checked the time on my phone. It was 3:26 inches the afternoon, which is early for the night shift. But my boss had asked me to check something in the shed before the sun went down. I drove the same road I always take into town, past the feed store and the little gas station that still has the old numbers on the sign, and I remember the sky was clear. Not dramatic, not stormy, just regular pale blue. Nothing in it said that this was the day my life was going to tilt. I pulled into the gravel lot by the cemetery like I always do. Marigold Rest is not a big place. It is a small town cemetery with headstones that lean. Some names worn down so much you have to get close to read them. And there are always a few bouquets of plastic flowers that never fade no matter how long they sit there. There is a chain link fence along the road, a metal gate that we keep locked after hours, and a little maintenance shed with a light that does not always work right. The office is small, just one room with a desk and a file cabinet and the old clock where I punch in. I remember I clocked in at 3:58 p.m. and wrote my initials in the logbook. Just like always. Nothing was strange yet. My boss, Mr. Harlan, had left a note on the desk about a row of graves that needed trimming and a broken latch on the back fence that I was supposed to check later. I took the note, folded it, and put it in my pocket. I know this sounds boring, but I am telling you this because I keep going over it in my head, looking for a moment where something slipped, where the world warned me. There was nothing. I spent the rest of the daylight hours doing normal work. I checked the shed, refueled the mower, walked the rows with my clipboard to mark which plots needed upkeep before the weekend. I remember the sound of the gravel under my boots, the way the dry grass brushed against my pants, the faint smell of cut grass from earlier in the week. The sun went down slow, and the temperature dropped the way it does in December, where it is not freezing yet, but the air starts to bite a little. I ate my sandwich sitting on the back step of the office around 6:30, watching the sky turn darker, the last light catching the tops of the headstones. There was a service earlier in the day, so there were fresh flowers on one of the newer graves, and I remember thinking the ribbons looked too bright against the dull stone. The only lights we have out there are the one by the gate, the one over the shed door, and the ones from a few houses down the road. Once it gets late, the traffic dies down, and all you hear is the wind and sometimes a dog barking far off. That night felt the same as any other. At least it did at first. My job on the night shift is mostly security and maintenance. Make sure the gate stays locked, make sure no one is wandering around who should not be, check that nobody has knocked over anything, that sort of thing. Sometimes I sit in the office and go through records or drink coffee to stay awake. Sometimes I do rounds with a flashlight if kids have been seen hanging around. That evening, around 9, I walked the inside of the fence with my flashlight, checking the corners, shining the beam along the line where the graves start and the fence ends. It was quiet. No cars on the road. No voices. Just that dry wind that makes the little plastic flags and flowers rattle against their wires. I did not see anything strange then. I finished my walk, went back to the office, sat in the old rolling chair that squeaks when you lean back, and scrolled through my phone for a while. Around 10:30, I made myself another cup of coffee in the little machine in the corner, even though it always tastes like old filters. I checked the logbook again, just out of habit. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand clicked along, like it always does. I cannot stress enough how normal it all was. The first wrong thing happened close to midnight. I know the time because I checked my phone twice. I was in the office with the lights off to save power. Only the glow from my phone and the little light over the door coming in from outside. I heard gravel crunch out by the path that runs through the middle of the cemetery. Not the wind, not a loose branch. Footsteps. Slow, steady, like someone walking between the rows. At first, I thought it might be Mr. Harlan doing a surprise check, or maybe someone from the sheriff's office, but they always park out front and knock. No engine noise came before the sound of those steps. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and went to the door. The air hit me when I stepped outside. It had gone colder. I could see my breath a little, just faint in the light from the office door. The sky was clear, no clouds, no fog. The gate was closed and chained like it should be. The houses down the way had their porch lights on, but the windows looked dark. I stepped off the concrete pad and onto the gravel, and that is when I saw the light. It was not one of our lights. It was deeper inside, between the rows. A small, steady light at about chest height, warm and yellow, the way an old lantern looks. It moved, not fast, just gliding between the stones. A little bob in its motion, like someone holding it while walking. My first thought was that some idiot had climbed the fence and brought in their own lantern for some reason. We do not have lanterns at the cemetery. We have flashlights and the regular fixtures, nothing with a handle and glass. I called out without really thinking. Just a simple, "Hey, you are not supposed to be in there after hours," that kind of thing. The light kept moving and did not swing toward me like someone turning around. It passed behind a taller monument, disappeared for a second, then came back into view a little closer to the center path. I walked forward, boots crunching on the small stones, my flashlight in my right hand, the beam aimed low so I would not blind myself. I kept waiting to see the shape of the person carrying that light, their outline, their clothes, anything. The lantern glow stayed there, bright and steady, but there was no shape attached to it that I could make out. Only the tops of stones catching a little of the reflection when it drifted near them. I told myself it was just the distance and the angle. I told myself a lot of things that night. The rules say nobody is allowed inside after dusk unless it is a scheduled thing, and nobody had called about a late visit. So I kept going. I passed the first row of older graves, the ones with the leaning stones and faded writing. The wind pushed against my jacket, and the sound of those little plastic flowers clicking kept rising and falling. The lantern moved again, shifting a little to the left, then stopping near one of the newer sections. It hovered there, not swinging at all now. Just one fixed point of yellow in a field of dark stone. That is when I noticed how quiet it had gotten. The wind dropped. No dogs, no distant engine, even the hum from the highway, which you can usually hear if you listen hard, was gone. It was like someone had pressed mute on the world, except for the crunch of my own footsteps and my breathing. I felt a tightness in my chest that I tried to ignore. I told myself this was still just a person, and I needed to get them out. I reached the main path and turned toward the light. It was maybe 30 yards away, not far, but my flashlight beam seemed thinner than usual, like it did not want to reach that far. I lifted it and shined it toward the lantern. The beam hit a row of stones, the grass, the narrow gravel path that splits the section. It did not light up any person. The lantern itself did not flare or dim. It just stayed where it was. It took me a second to notice the headstone beside it. It was clean, newer stone, squared edges, the kind the families pick when it has not been that long. I could see the shape of it even at that distance, and something in me decided I needed to know whose name was on it. I kept walking. My boots slipped a little on a patch of loose gravel, I steadied myself on a stone as I passed, felt the cold surface under my palm. I remember the name on that one, because it has always stuck with me. Mary Ann Gutierrez, 1932 to 2009. I used to trim around her grave all the time. Thinking of that now makes my stomach turn because it proves that my memory works. I am not someone who mixes up details. When I reached the lantern, I stopped. It was maybe 2 arm lengths away. It was the kind of lantern you see in old photos. Metal frame, glass panes, little handle on top. The flame inside burned steady. There was no smoke, no smell of fuel. It did not sway. It did not flicker. It sat at about the height of my chest, hanging in the air where a hand should have been, and there was nothing there holding it. I swept my flashlight beam around, expecting to catch an arm, a coat sleeve, a face. The light showed me grass, stone, a low concrete border, and the headstone beside the lantern. The top of that stone caught both lights, my harsh white beam and the soft yellow from the flame. I lowered the flashlight and looked straight at it. I can tell you exactly what I saw. The name on that stone was mine. Not just my last name from some cousin or relative. My full name, Daniel Mercer. The date of birth carved underneath was my exact birthday. Same day, same month, same year. The date of death was blank. There was a dash, and nothing after it. My throat closed. For a second, I thought I was reading it wrong, so I stepped closer, right into the reach of that lantern glow. The letters were sharp and clean. The numbers were exact. I reached out and touched the carved letters with my fingers. I could feel the edges, the way the stone dips where they cut the shapes. My vision tunneled, and I took my hand back like the stone was hot. My first thought was that this was some sick joke. Maybe someone ordered a stone as a prank. Maybe the engraving place messed up and sent the wrong slab. I told myself it had to be a clerical error. I told myself I would go back to the office, check the files, and find a Daniel Mercer born in another year, some old man or a kid, and I just happened to forget. But when I tried to step back, I realized my feet did not want to move. It was not that I was frozen with fear, not at first. It was that something about the rows behind me did not look right anymore. I turned my head a little, keeping the lantern in the corner of my eye. The path I had walked down looked narrower than I remembered. The stones on either side seemed closer together, the rows a little tighter. There should have been an open cross path about 10 yards back, where the carts usually go through. It was not there. In its place were more headstones, shoulder to shoulder, filling the space. I forced myself to turn all the way around. The main path that runs from the front gate straight back through the center was gone. In its place were rows, stones, names, dates, all packed in tight. As far as my flashlight could reach, my stomach flipped. I knew that layout. I have walked it 100 times. There should have been a clear line from where I stood back to the front gate. Instead, I was facing what looked like a section I had never seen, all cramped together, no gaps, no walkways wide enough for the mower. I told myself I was turned around, that I had cut across and ended up in one of the older back sections without realizing it, even though I knew that was not possible. I turned back to the lantern, and this time, it had moved. It was closer by at least 2 feet, and I had not seen it move. It still hung at the same height, flame steady, but the distance between it and the stone with my name was smaller now. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I took a step back and felt stone against my heel. I looked down. There was a grave marker right behind me that had not been there a moment before. I would have seen it, would have had to step over it. The name on it was one I did not recognize, but the date of death was that same week. Not the date from the note my boss left. This was not in the records. I swallowed hard and called out again. Louder this time, my voice cracking. I shouted that whoever was out here needed to cut it out, that it was not funny, that they needed to show themselves. Nothing answered. The lantern did not sway. The wind did not pick up. There was just that quiet and the smell of cold stone and old grass. My hand was slick on the flashlight. I wiped it on my shirt, felt the rough fabric under my palm. I tried to walk around the stone with my name on it, thinking I would circle wide, find the place where the paths lined up again. I took 3 steps to the side, then 4, careful not to trip. The rows changed with me. It is hard to explain this part without sounding crazy, but I'm telling you exactly how it happened. Every time I moved, the layout shifted. Not fast, not in front of my eyes, but in the way where you look up and realize the gap you were aiming for is now filled. The stones formed lines between me and the direction of the gate. No matter which way I angled, every opening narrowed into a dead end. The only clear space was the small circle around that lantern and the headstone with my name on it. It was like someone had taken the whole cemetery and turned it, not in a dramatic way, just enough that every straight path became crooked. I kept trying. I walked toward what I thought was the back section. But when I looked up, I was still in line with that same stone. My breaths came out faster, my chest hurt. I said out loud that I did not want any trouble, that I would leave, that I got the message, trying to keep my voice steady, but it kept shaking. I checked my phone for the time. It said 12:07 a.m. The battery bar had dropped lower than it should have. The signal bars were gone, no service. I backed up until I could feel the base of that stone against my calf. The lantern was now almost touching the top edge. The flame reflected in the polished part of the granite. I could see the engraved dash under my birth date, catching that yellow light. My hands started to tingle. My fingertips felt numb. The air around me felt heavier, like breathing through a wet cloth. I realized I was surrounded by silence that did not feel empty. It felt aware. I do not know how else to put it without sounding dramatic, but it was the feeling you get when someone is watching you, except I could not point to where it was coming from. My eyes kept wanting to flick to the sides, expecting to see someone standing between the stones. But there was nothing. Just markers and grass and that one wrong light. I do not know how long I stood there, but my legs started to ache. That is when the lantern changed. The flame inside, which had been a steady small thing, grew taller. It did not flicker or snap. It climbed, stretching up to fill the glass, turning from a soft yellow to a deeper orange. The metal frame began to show details I had not noticed before. Small dents and scratches, the kind that come from years of use. The handle at the top, which had been hanging still, rose slightly, as if something invisible had tightened its grip. The light from it spread out, not harsh, but strong enough that I could see beyond the nearest row of stones more clearly. That was when I realized there was a shape standing behind the lantern. It was not there 1 second and then there the next. Not a blur, not a movement, just suddenly present. It was a figure dressed in clothing that did not belong to this time. A long, dark coat that buttoned up the front, a high collar, trousers that looked too straight and stiff to be modern, boots that caught a dull shine in the lantern glow. The proportions were human. Shoulders, arms, chest, legs. It stood straight, not hunched, not reaching, just standing. The only part that was wrong, the part my brain did not want to recognize at first, was the head. Where the head should have been, there was only the outline. No features, no hair, no eyes or mouth. The space where a face should be was filled entirely with that same deep orange light, not just reflecting but burning from inside, as if the lantern flame had moved into it. The edges of the head were clear in the glow, but the middle was bright, a solid color, no shape of bone or skin. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the top of the headstone beside me to steady myself. The stone felt real, cold, rough on the edges, smooth where they had polished it. The figure did not move toward me. It did not raise its arms. It just stood there. The lantern now hanging from one of its hands that I could only see because the metal of the handle cut across the glow. My mouth went dry. I could not think of anything to say. I wanted to shout, to demand something, but the only word that came out was a choked question. I asked what it wanted. The sound of my voice seemed small compared to the weight of the quiet around us. The figure tilted, not much, just a slight angle of the shoulders, as if it was acknowledging that I had spoken. Then the light inside its head flared brighter, and everything around me slipped. I did not fall to the ground. I did not black out. It was more like someone had taken the night and folded it over itself. I was still standing in the cemetery, but at the same time, I was not. I saw the ground beneath my boots, but my feet were not there. I saw the rows of stones, but they were wrong, doubled, 2 sets overlaid, one solid, one faint. The strongest thing I saw, the one image that burned into me, was a grave being dug, not a finished grave. In this vision, the dirt was fresh, piled up on a tarp at the side, a rectangular hole cut into the earth, precise and deep. The shovels were there, stuck into the pile, handles leaning at angles. The walls of the grave were straight, the soil darker where it was damp. There were boot prints stamped around it in the loose earth. I recognized those, the pattern on the soles, the worn patch on the heel. They were mine. I saw my own hands working, not from my usual angle, not looking from behind my eyes, but from somewhere else, a little to the side, like another person watching. My hands held the shovel, the same shovel I use on the grounds, with the worn grip and the bit of tape around the middle where the wood splintered last year. I watched those hands dig, lifting heavy scoops of dirt, throwing them up onto the pile. There was no sound of metal hitting stone, no grunt from effort. It looked easy, too easy, like the soil weighed nothing. The sky above in that vision was the same as the night I was in, clear and dark, no clouds. The lantern light in that scene came from the edge of the open grave, set on the ground, its glow catching the edges of the hole. I tried to tell myself I was remembering some other burial we had done, some routine job, but there was one detail that destroyed that excuse. On the tarp beside the grave was a headstone, not yet set in place. Leaning against the soil, the plastic wrapping had been pulled down halfway. The engraved side faced me. It was the same stone I had just touched in the real cemetery. The one with my name, my date of birth, the empty space waiting after the dash. I felt my heart hammering even though I could not feel my body. I tried to look away in that vision, to turn my head, but I could not move anything. I was locked into watching as those hands finished the grave. The pile of dirt beside the tarp shrank, the hole deepened, the sides smoothed. Time did not move right. 1 second, there was a shallow cut in the earth. The next, it was already deeper, and my hands were tamping down the bottom. I wanted to scream. Instead, I heard my own voice talking. Calm, steady, saying ordinary things I would say to myself when working. Stuff like this should be good, that is deep enough. Make sure the edges are smooth. It was my voice working through a job, except the job was digging a place for my own body. When the grave in that vision reached the right depth, my hands set the shovel aside and went to the headstone. They lifted it, adjusted the plastic, brushed dirt off the base. The lantern light slid over the carved letters. The date of birth caught the glow. The space after the dash stayed blank, but the stone felt finished, completed. I watched myself carry it, position it at the head of the grave, line it up with the others in the row. Even though there was no casket, no ceremony, no mourners, just me and the work and the waiting hole. Then the vision changed. There was no gradual shift. One moment, I was watching that scene. The next, I was inside the grave. Looking up, the edges of the hole framed the sky. The headstone at the top loomed, the lantern sitting on the ground in front of it. Dirt started to fall, not in big chunks, just little bits at first. A sprinkle that dusted my face, my shirt, my hair. I could not move my arms, could not lift my hands. The dirt kept coming, steady, controlled, like someone was finishing the job. The sky narrowed as the walls closed in, not from the earth rising, but from something above blocking it. The last thing I saw in that view was the lantern flame. It did not go out, it stayed burning, even as the space around it darkened. Then I was back, just like that. Back in my body, standing by the stone with my name on it, one hand still braced on the top edge, my other hand clenching the flashlight hard enough that my knuckles hurt. The figure with the glowing head was still there, standing in the same spot, lantern in hand. The flame inside it was lower again, small and steady, as if nothing had happened. My chest felt tight, my legs shook. Sweat ran down my back even though the air was cold. I realized my fingernails were packed with dirt. I do not know when that happened. My hands had been clean when I left the office. Now there was soil under every nail, dark and compacted, like I had been clawing at the ground. I choked out a question, asking if I had done that, if I had really dug that hole. The figure did not answer. Its head turned just slightly, the glow inside shifting. No mouth to move, no eyes to lock onto. Then, slowly, it raised the hand that was not holding the lantern and pointed. Not at me, not at the stone with my name. It pointed past me, behind me. My skin went cold. I turned my head in the direction it indicated. The rows behind me, which a moment before had been a tangle of stones and blocked paths, now parted. A straight line opened between two sections, a clear route leading away from the stone. At the far end of that line, I could see the faint outline of the front gate and the streetlight beyond it. It was like the cemetery had decided, just then, to remember its original layout again. I did not think. I ran. I did not care about the rules, about being careful around the stones. I kept my light aimed at the ground enough that I did not trip, but my legs were moving faster than they should have on that terrain. The air around me felt thicker at my back, like something was closing in, but I did not look over my shoulder. I focused on the gate, on the metal posts, on the steady light from the road. My breath came in harsh pulls, my chest burned. My boots hit gravel, then the harder packed dirt of the main path, then the strip of cracked concrete near the entrance. When I reached the gate, the chain was still threaded through the bars, the padlock hanging in place. My hands fumbled with the keys on my belt. The first one slipped, the second one stuck. I finally got the right one into the lock, turned it with hands that did not want to stay still, and yanked the chain free. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. The sound of that metal was the first normal sound I had heard in what felt like hours. I stepped out onto the roadside, my whole body shaking. When I turned to look back through the open gate, the cemetery looked the way it always does. The main path down the center, the sections laid out in their regular order. The shed light, weak but steady. There was no sign of the lantern. No figure. Just rows of stone and a few plastic flowers moving in the wind that had decided to return. I locked the gate again from the outside, hands still trembling, and walked to my truck without looking away from the fence. I climbed in, shut the door, and sat there for a long time with the engine off, staring through the windshield. Eventually, I checked the time on my phone. It was 12:09 a.m. 2 minutes. That is what the clock said. Everything I just told you, all of that, fit inside 2 minutes on a cheap digital display. I know that is not possible. I know what I experienced stretched longer than that. My muscles still ached the way they do after hard work. My nails were still full of dirt that should not have been there. I could still taste the metallic tang in the air from when the world folded in that vision. I did not go back inside the cemetery that night. I sat in the truck until dawn, engine off, keys in my lap, staring at the gate. I kept expecting to see that lantern glow through the chain link, but the only lights were from the street and the sunrise. When the sky turned gray and then lighter, I finally forced myself out. I told myself I needed to prove that what I had seen on that headstone was some kind of mistake. I unlocked the gate and walked in, my legs stiff from sitting. The ground looked normal. The paths were where they were supposed to be. The crosswalk between sections was clear. I went straight to the spot where I remembered the stone with my name. There was nothing there. No headstone, no disturbed earth, just grass with a little frost on it and a marker for an older grave several feet away. I combed that whole section for almost an hour, checking every newer stone, reading every name out loud. None of them were mine. There was no empty slot where a stone had been removed. No fresh dirt pile. No open grave. The place where I thought my stone had been was just another patch of ground. After that, I went to the shed to check the tools. The shovel I had seen in my hands in that vision was on the rack, same as always. The tape on the handle frayed, the blade dull at the edges. I picked it up. Dirt flaked off the metal in little dry clumps. That is not unusual for a shovel that gets used, but there was a pattern in the dried soil on the blade, a clean line where it looked like it had been pressed hard against the edge of something straight. Maybe I am reading too much into that. Maybe I am not. I washed my hands in the sink in the office. The dirt under my nails did not come out easily. It stuck, packed in, and I had to dig at it with the small brush we keep by the faucet. It smelled like the deeper soil we hit when we go down more than a couple feet, darker and wetter than the surface. I checked the records next. I pulled out the file drawer and flipped through the folders for recent burials, scanning the names. No one named Daniel Mercer. No one with my birthday. I checked the order forms for new stones. Nothing. I even looked back a few years, thinking maybe I had forgotten some family member or distant relative buried there. The name did not show up. The more I looked, the worse I felt. There was no place in the paperwork where that stone could fit. That should have calmed me down. It did the opposite. If there is no record, if there is no order, then what did I touch out there? I told Mr. Harlan a small part of it later that week. I did not mention the stone with my name or the figure with the light in its head. I just said I thought I saw someone with a lantern out in the rows around midnight and that I could not find them when I went after them. He shrugged it off, said maybe it was kids messing around, said if I did not find any damage or trash, it was probably nothing. He asked if I was tired and told me to take an extra thermos of coffee next time. I nodded, said sure, did not push it further. How do you tell your boss that you watched yourself dig your own grave in a place where the ground refuses to admit it? Since that night, things have not gone back to normal for me, even when everything around me looks the same. I still have the same house, the same green shirt with the dark stain on the sleeve, the same truck with the dent in the front bumper. I still drive past that cemetery on my way into town, but I do not walk inside the gate anymore. I told Mr. Harlan I could not work nights for a while because of some made-up health issue. He grumbled, moved me to more daylight duties, brought in a younger guy for the night shift. On paper, it all looks reasonable. In my head, nothing is right. Every time I drive by Marigold Rest after dark, I cannot keep my eyes on the road the way I am supposed to. They always drag to that gate. Sometimes the light over the shed flickers. Sometimes it is out. Twice now, I have seen a faint warm glow deeper inside, between the rows, at about chest height. I tell myself it is a reflection from a car turning somewhere else, or a porch light catching the stones. I turn up the radio and keep driving. During the day, when I have to go in for some paperwork or to fix something near the fence, I will not walk the rows alone. If someone asks me to show them to a grave, I make excuses, tell them I am working on something, send them to the map in the office instead. When I sleep, I dream of dirt. Not falling, just there, pressing in from all sides. The smell of it fills my nose. The feel of it under my nails returns. I wake up and check my hands. Sometimes they are clean. Sometimes there is soil in the cracks of my skin that I do not remember picking up. I moved my bed away from the window facing the street because a few weeks ago, around 3 a.m, I woke up and saw a faint orange light at the edge of my yard, at the height of a person holding a lantern. When I blinked, it was gone, but the dread stayed. I changed the way I drive through town. If I see a cemetery on my route, even one I have never worked at, I will add minutes to my trip just to avoid passing it. I checked my own name online the other day, something I never used to do. It was just a dumb impulse. I wanted to see if anything strange came up. The search results were normal. Social media, A couple of old job listings, nothing out of the ordinary. But one late night, when I tried again, the page took longer to load, and for a second, I swear I saw a funeral listing with my name before it blinked away and turned into something else. Maybe that was my tired brain. Maybe it was some glitch. I do not know anymore. I have not told this full story to anyone in my life. You are the first person hearing it all the way through. I know how it sounds. I know you can sit there and say I had some kind of waking nightmare, or that I misread the stone, or that I nodded off in the office and dreamed it all. I wish that was the case. I wish I could blame this on lack of sleep or bad coffee. But I cannot ignore the dirt under my nails when I had not touched a shovel. I cannot ignore the way the paths moved under my feet. I cannot ignore the image of my own name carved into stone in a place where no one ordered that marker. I am telling you this because I need someone to know in case one day that stone appears for real. Maybe someday, long from now, some other groundskeeper will open a box from the engraver and pull out a headstone that already has my full name and my dates on it, even if the date of death is years ahead of when they receive it. Maybe they will shrug and assume it is a mistake. Set it aside. Forget about it until it is needed. Maybe they will not think anything of a lantern left on the ground near a fresh grave. I need you to understand that something in that cemetery showed me work that has not happened yet. Since that night, I cannot stand the feeling of gravel under my boots in the dark. I cannot listen to the sound of plastic flowers rattling in the wind without it turning my stomach. When I drive past any place where there are headstones, I turn the radio up, not because I like the song, but because I need to drown out the idea that someone inside might be calling me over to finish a job I never started. I do not know what that figure was. I do not know if it was a person who used to work there, or something the cemetery made, or something else entirely. I only know that it did not speak. It did not chase me. It did not raise a hand against me. It just showed me a version of the ground with my place already carved out and then let me go. That is the part that scares me more than anything. It did not threaten. It did not promise. It just informed. Since then, every choice I make feels smaller. I used to think I had time, that my life would move along in a straight line. Now I feel like I am walking along the edge of a grave that is already there, even if I cannot see it in the daylight. You can believe me or not. You can say it was stress, or a trick of the light, or some deep fear working its way out. I am not trying to convince you to be afraid of lanterns or stones or night shifts. I am telling you this because if you ever find yourself in a cemetery after dark and you see a light that should not be there, one that does not flicker, one that waits instead of moves, I want you to turn around before you get close enough to read your own name. I will not walk between the rows at night again. I will not step through that gate once the sun is gone. I used to think cemeteries were just quiet places where nothing happens unless the living bring flowers. Now I know they are not empty at all. Something out there works on a schedule that has nothing to do with ours. And sometimes it shows you the line it has already drawn for you, carved in stone, waiting for a date that may not be as far away as you think. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm from Maple Hollow, Tennessee, and I work as a forklift driver at a distribution warehouse off the highway. And I swear to God, I am not making any of this up. Man, I am shaking in this car right now. My hands will not stop. Today started like nothing. That is the worst part. I woke up around 6 because my alarm on the old Samsung buzzes like a wasp nest, and I hit snooze once, just once, because my back was killing me from the shift yesterday. I remember what I had for breakfast because I keep seeing it in my throat right now. 2 slices of that cheap wheat bread, toasted a little too long so the edges were burned, with peanut butter so thick it stuck to my teeth. I drank instant coffee out of the chipped mug with the faded football logo, the one my brother left when he moved out. I put on the same work pants I always wear, the dark gray ones with a little rip near the right knee, and my warehouse polo, and over that I pulled on my worn-out green hoodie because the mornings have been colder lately. There is a grease stain right under the left pocket from when I leaned against a pallet jack last week. I remember staring at that stain while I was brushing my teeth and thinking I should bleach it. And that is the stupid little detail my brain picked to hold onto when everything started going wrong. I checked my phone around 6:30, scrolled past a couple of messages I did not feel like reading, checked the weather, then checked the time again right before I walked out. 6:37. I remember that number. I remember locking the door, testing it twice like I always do, and walking to my old blue Honda that has this slow crank in the mornings. I tossed my camera bag into the back seat because that was the plan. Work first, then cemetery. It sounds bad when I say it like that, but it was just a photography thing, dude. I swear. I am not one of those weird people hanging around graves for fun. I have been trying to get better at long exposure night shots, the kind where the lights streak and everything looks like a movie frame. And someone online mentioned that foggy cemeteries look crazy on camera. There is this place, Willow Bend Burial Grounds, just outside town on a little hill. I pass it all the time, going to work. Old iron gate, a sign that is flaking paint, rose sliding down the slope toward the trees. I always thought it looked kind of sad, but pretty in the early morning mist. I had never gone in. That was the whole thing. I was going to go in after work, just for an hour, get some shots of the fog if it rolled in like it does some evenings. It sounded like a normal plan in my head at the time. At work, everything was the same. I punched in at 6:58, 2 minutes early, the way my supervisor likes. The warehouse lights buzzed overhead, that high-ringing hum, and I moved pallets of boxed-up appliances from one rack to another. It was cold near the loading docks and warm near the back, and all day I kept thinking about angles and shutter speed instead of inventory codes. At lunch, I ate a microwave burrito that was still cold in the center and checked the forecast again. Chance of fog after 9. My chest did this little excited thing, like finally something I look forward to that is not just sitting in front of the TV. I told my coworker Mark I was going to go up to Willow Bend after shift, and he laughed and said, "Man, you can go take your ghost pictures. I will be home under a blanket by then." I told him it was not about ghosts. It was about the light. And he said whatever. And that was it. Nobody warned me. Nobody told me any story. If they had, I do not know if I would have listened. I clocked out at 4:30 on the dot, drove home with the radio low, changed out of the polo into a plain, dark, long-sleeve shirt and my black jacket that zips up to the neck, because I figured darker clothes would not reflect light if I accidentally stepped into frame. I checked my phone again. 5:08. Sunset was a little after 5:30 that day, and I wanted the last light slipping out before real night. I packed my tripod, spare battery, the 50mm lens, a little flashlight, and I almost forgot the extra memory card sitting in a drawer by my socks. That part sticks with me for some reason. Me standing there with my socks half pulled out, thinking, you will kick yourself if the card fills up. That tiny decision is how I keep tracing it back. If I had not gone back for that card, would anything be different? I left my apartment around 5:15. The car coughed before starting, like always, and I told myself I would look at the battery this weekend. That is funny now in a way that makes me want to throw up. The drive up to Willow Bend from Maple Hollow is only about 15 minutes, too, if you are just passing by on the highway, but when you turn off you take this narrow road that wraps around the side of the hill with the cemetery up top. There are no streetlights once you leave the main road, only your own headlights, and the faint glow from town behind you. I remember the sky being this flat gray smear. No stars, just this heavy feeling like the clouds were sitting right on top of the hill. The closer I got, the more I saw little wisps of fog starting to gather in the low grassy spots, and I felt that nerdy photographer excitement again. I pulled up near the gate around 5:32. I know because I tapped my phone to check, and the lock screen flashed that time at me. The iron gate of Willow Bend Burial Grounds was standing open, just a little. There is a chain on it with a padlock, but the chain was looped so loose someone could just slide through. The sign on the gate says something like, "Visiting hours dawn to dusk," and I remember thinking, okay, technically I am pushing it, but the light is still here. There was no one else parked there, just my blue car idling with a little rattle. I killed the engine, and immediately the quiet hit me. Town noise was a faint, distant thing down the hill, like a TV left on 2 houses away. Up there, by the gate, all I really heard was a slight hiss of air moving through the dry grass and this weird, faint clack of plastic flowers touching each other when the breeze nudged them. You know that sound, right? Those faded plastic bouquets you see taped to headstones, the ones that rattle instead of rustle. I slung the camera bag over my shoulder, grabbed the tripod, and, for a second, I hesitated with my hand on the gate. It was not dread, not like in a movie. It was more like that small, guilty feeling, like I was stepping somewhere I should only step for funerals. I told myself, it is just for pictures. Dude, you are not hurting anything. Be respectful. Get your shots. Be out. I slipped through the gap without touching the chain because I did not want it to clink. The ground inside was uneven, packed dirt and gravel mixed, with tire tracks from the grounds crew. As I walked up the main path, the fog thickened in little pools between the rows, sitting low around the bases of the stones like white water filling the gaps. The headstones at Willow Bend are old in the front, near the gate, leaning and covered in lichen, with names half worn off. The further up you go toward the hill's crest, the newer they get, cleaner granite, clearer letters. I walked up slowly because I did not want to trip or step on anything, and because I was already planning shots in my head. Long rows fading into fog, lights from town blurred in the distance behind the stones, maybe a long exposure of the road below with car lights moving like streaks under the hill. At that point, it was not even fully dark yet. The sky was still a lighter gray than the ground, and the silhouettes of the trees around the edges were sharp. I set the tripod near the middle row, facing down the slope, framed a shot with some older headstones in the foreground, and the faint glow of Maple Hollow way below. I checked my settings. Low ISO, narrow aperture, 20-second exposure. I took a test shot. While the shutter was open, I just stood there listening to the quiet. I could hear my own breathing and the faint hum of my car cooling off behind the gate. Maybe a dog 2 streets down barking. When the shot finished, the camera gave that little click and the screen lit up. The image looked nice, a little underexposed, but the fog at the bottom looked like a low river, and the lights down in town were little yellow beads. No weird shapes, nothing. I adjusted, tried again. I took maybe 6 or 7 shots from that first spot, tweaking by tiny amounts. It got darker, faster than I expected. By the time I moved deeper between the rows, it was real twilight, and the fog had risen, this low rolling layer maybe up to my calves. It was not movie fog, not thick swirling clouds, just this constant soft sheet around the bases of the headstones and between them. I remember the way it felt on my skin, cool and faintly damp, and I swear it had this metallic taste in the air, like licking a battery, and that is not something I ever felt with fog before. Maybe that should have been the first sign. I shifted the tripod to a spot where the path split, forming a little Y between 2 sections. There was a big tree there, some kind of old oak, and under it, a couple of newer stones with clean white surfaces that caught what little light was left. I framed those against the dark shape of the tree and the fog behind them. This time, I went for a longer exposure, 30 seconds, just to see what it would do. As the camera clicked and the shutter opened, my eyes wandered. There was nobody around. No groundskeeper truck, no other cars, no one visiting graves this late. Most of the plastic flowers near me were red and sun-faded pink, with some of those little spinning pinwheels that barely turned when the air stirred. I remember hearing one creak slowly and thinking about how the shot would capture that blur. The camera beeped softly when it was done. I hit play, zoomed in a little to check focus, and that is when my stomach dropped for the first time. In the frame, halfway down the row to the left, there was a shape, a dark, upright shape between 2 headstones, taller than the stones, thinner, almost human height, but no detail I could make out because of the fog blurring the edges and the long exposure. It just looked like a person standing completely still, centered in the gap. The weird thing was, I knew, 100%, I had not seen anyone when the shutter was open. I had been staring in that direction, actually, watching the way the fog moved between those very stones. There had been nothing there. I told myself it was a tree trunk I had not noticed, or some shadow from a stone that looked different in the camera. My heart rate kicked a little higher, but I tried to push it down. I lowered the camera, looked down the actual row with my eyes. Between those two headstones, there was nothing but fog and faint grass. No tree, no statue, nothing. I remember saying out loud, very quietly, "Okay, that is just some weird exposure thing. Dude, relax." I set the tripod a little lower to change the perspective and took another shot. This time, pointing slightly more to the right, so the spot where that shape had been was closer to the center of frame. The shutter opened. While it was recording, I stared straight down that row, not blinking, watching for any hint of movement. The air felt cold against my ears, and I could hear this faint trickle from somewhere, like water moving under the ground, which made no sense. When the shutter closed and the camera beeped, my thumb shook when I hit play. The new image popped up. The dark shape was still there, only this time it was closer. Not by much, but close enough that I could tell. It was now in front of the stones instead of between them, like it had stepped forward toward the camera during the exposure. But again, I had seen nothing with my plain eyes. No footfalls on the gravel, no change in the fog, nothing. Just this smudge of a figure, appearing closer between 1 second and the next, but only on the screen. I felt this wave of cold rush up my chest. My first thought, dumb as it sounds, was that someone was messing with me. Some teenager running between the stones faster than I could see, timing it during the long exposures. I lifted my head and called out, "Hello, you out there." My voice sounded too loud and then too small at the same time. It just got soaked up by the fog and the stones. No answer, no giggle, no footsteps running away. The only reply was the faint rattle of plastic flowers as the air shifted. I told myself, "Okay, maybe you are catching a shadow of yourself. Maybe the camera is picking up a blur from your own body, even if you are off to the side." So I decided to test it. I backed way up, like a good 10 feet from the tripod, on the opposite side from where that shape had appeared. I pointed the camera slightly more straight down the main path this time, so the row with that spot was a little off-center. I set the timer to 2 seconds so I would not shake it, pressing the shutter. Then, stepped well away. Hands behind my back, standing completely still, where I could see both the path and the screen glow faintly on the camera body. My shoes crunched softly on the gravel as I moved and then went quiet again. The fog swirled around my ankles when I stopped, hugging my shoes. I watched. The shutter opened with a quiet click. 30 seconds is a long time when you are standing alone in a cemetery on a hill in rising fog. I could hear my own breathing louder than I wanted, and the tiny tick of the cooling metal on the tripod. I stared down the path. At that exact gap between those stones, nothing moved. Nothing stepped out. Nothing even flickered. But when the shot finished and the image came up, the shape was in the frame again, and it was closer, dead center now, taller, blocking the view of the row behind it, like someone had taken 3 slow steps toward me during the exposure. And again, I had seen nothing. The shape had no face, not even in the zoomed-in pixels. Just the suggestion of shoulders and a head, like a cutout someone had set upright. My mouth went dry. I felt this pressure in my ears like they had popped. I walked back to the camera, and I realized, somewhere while I had been standing there, my fingers had started to tremble. Listen. Man, I know this sounds like a bad story, but I work around heavy equipment all day. I am not the type to spook easy, and this did not feel like spooking. This felt like a math problem, giving the wrong answer 3 times in a row. I told myself, maybe something is wrong with the sensor. Maybe it is picking up some ghost image from a previous frame. I turned the camera off, waited a couple seconds, turned it back on. The fog had thickened now up to my shins. The town lights below were dimmer, like someone had turned down the world. I shifted the tripod to face a completely different direction, away from that row, I aimed it toward a cluster of older stones near the fence and the highway side, where the silhouettes of cars far below made a faint moving glow. I checked the time. 6:09. It was fully dark now, but the sky still had a little lighter strip near the horizon. I took a deep breath and hit the shutter again. Long exposure. This time, while it recorded, I kept my eyes fixed on the cluster of stones in front of the lens. Nothing there but the thin white fog hugging their bases and the dark tree line behind. Again the camera beeped. I hit play. At first glance, everything in the frame looked fine. Stones in front, fence behind, a faint blur of car lights way down the hill. For a second, I started to relax. Then I saw them. Not one shape. Many. Scattered between the stones in the midground of the shot, half obscured by the fog, were darker vertical forms. Some taller, some shorter, all about the width of a human body. All perfectly still. A little too perfectly. They were just there, like someone had taken cutouts and placed them between random graves. In the actual space in front of me, I saw nothing but marble and granite and fog. On the screen, it looked like there were maybe 6 or 7 people spaced out between the stones, all facing the camera. None of them had features. Just the impression of a front-facing posture. I felt my throat close up. My first instinct was to get off that hill. I actually lifted the tripod to fold it, but something stopped me. It was this stupid photographer instinct, the part of your brain that says, "You are catching something crazy here. Do not bail, figure it out." That part of me fought with the part yelling to leave. The result was I compromised, which, in hindsight, might have been the worst option. I decided I would take one more shot, a really long exposure, then pack up and go home and analyze it on my computer, where things made sense. I told myself if it still looked weird, I could chalk it up to some long exposure artifact and maybe show a forum. That is how normal I wanted it to be. I moved the tripod again, this time to the very center of the path, where I could get a wide view up and down. The fog had come in thicker now, not just at ground level but rising in low curtains around the stones, maybe up to my knees, in some spots higher. It made the headstones look like they were emerging from a white sea. The plastic flowers near me clicked against each other. I can still hear the little tapping sound. I set the exposure to a full minute. 60 seconds. I wanted the fog to blur, the town lights to smear. As I was adjusting the focus, I heard something that was not the wind or the flowers. It was very faint, like fabric shifting against stone, the tiniest scrape. I turned my head fast. Nothing. Just that same field of markers and fog. My heart was hammering now, loud in my ears, and I remember saying out loud, "Okay, one more, and I am gone." I swear. I hit the shutter. The red light blinked. The screen went black. The viewfinder showed nothing but darkness. For that 60 seconds, I became hyper-aware of every sense. I could feel the damp through the soles of my shoes from the ground, smell wet earth and cut grass and that metallic tang in the fog, hear the distant faint whoosh of a car on the highway far below, then the quiet settle in again. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, down the main path, toward the far edge of the cemetery where the hill dropped off. At around what I think was the 30-second mark, my ears picked up something new. Soft crunches on gravel. Not my own feet. Not near me. But somewhere further down between the rows. Very slow. One. Then a pause. Then another. The sound of someone stepping carefully on loose stone. I could not see anything. There was no flashlight beam, no phone light, nothing. I told myself it was sound carrying weird in the fog from the road. Then the crunch came again, this time to my left. Then, after another long stretch of silence, to my right. Always the same distance away, as if whatever was making the noise was circling the path at the same radius, between the stones, never closer, never farther. It felt like an orbit. I did not move. I could feel my knees, wanting to buckle, but fear pinned me in place. The whole time, I kept telling myself, "Do not ruin the exposure. Do not bump the tripod. Do not run until it is done," which is ridiculous, but that is where my head was. When the camera finally clicked closed after the minute, the sound stopped. Just like that. No more crunches, only my heart and a faint plastic rattle somewhere behind me. My hand shook so badly when I hit play that I almost dropped the camera. The image loaded slowly because of the long exposure. At first it was just a blurry suggestion of rose and fog. Then details sharpened and I saw them. A full ring of figures, taller and darker than the headstones, standing between them in a rough circle around the central point where the camera must have been. The path in the middle was clear, but out in the rows, the shapes stood like a crowd, all facing inward, all oriented toward where I would have been. They varied in height, some too tall, their heads almost brushing the low branches of the nearest tree. Others, shorter, but they were spaced in a way that felt intentional, equal distances between them, forming this imperfect but undeniable ring. The fog blurred their edges, but their presence was solid. You know how sometimes in low light the camera catches streaks and trails? There were none. No motion blur, no sign that they had moved during the exposure. They were just there, fully formed, as if they had always been standing there. But I had seen empty rows. My breath caught in my throat so hard I coughed. I zoomed in on the nearest one. That was when I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. In the zoom, the figure closest to the camera was clearer, not by much, but enough to see that the outline of the shoulders was not right. It looked like something trying to wear the idea of a person, not the details. The head was a little too smooth. There were no facial features, not even hints, only a slightly lighter tone where a face would be, like a blank mask turned toward me. Behind it, in the fog, I could make out the vague shapes of cracked or tilted headstones at weird angles, as if they had shifted in the time between shots. Stones I knew had been upright before. I must have stood there too long studying it, because at some point, the air around me changed. I became aware of how quiet it had gotten. Not just normal quiet. There was no highway sound at all. No dog barking in the distance. No rustle from trees. Even the tiny clack of plastic flowers had gone fully still, like the air had frozen around them. And then, without any wind moving across my face, the fog rose. Not fast, not dramatically, but steadily. Like water filling a room. It climbed from my shins to my knees, to my thighs. It was cold and clammy, and it felt thick. Thicker than air should. I realized I could no longer see the bottoms of the headstones. The fog line reached my waist, then my chest. At the same time, I started to feel this pressure behind my eyes, like a headache about to explode. I backed up instinctively until my heel hit the edge of the path and slipped on loose gravel. I grabbed the tripod to steady myself. That was when it happened. I hit the shutter button by mistake while I was grabbing the tripod. The camera chirped, started another long exposure. I did not mean to. My thumb just did this desperate thing. Like maybe if I kept it recording it would make it all make sense later. But now the camera was facing me slightly, because I had knocked it. The lens was angled down the path but tilted enough that I thought it might catch part of my body in frame. I was bent over it, breathing fast. I told myself, "Daniel, you will grab the memory card when this one finishes. You will grab the tripod under your arm, and you will walk calmly to the gate. Not run, just walk, and get in the car and drive away, and you will never come back up here." That plan was so clear in my head it felt solid. Around this time, my ears started to pick up something under the fog. A new sound. It was not footsteps. Not this time. It was a steady, faint tapping, like many fingers drumming softly on stone, all around, irregular but somehow part of the same pattern. Tap, pause. Tap, tap, pause. Tap. It sounded like it was echoing from different places between the graves. Left, right, ahead, behind, never close enough to pinpoint, never far enough to ignore. I could not see anything moving through the white curtain. The fog had risen so high it was near my chin now. I inhaled and it felt like breathing through wet cloth. My heart pounded so hard my vision pulsed with it. I stared at that little blinking light waiting for it to stop. It felt like the longest minute of my life. Then, right when I thought I could not stay another second, I felt warm breath on the back of my neck. Just one exhale, like someone standing inches behind me had leaned in and gently let their lungs empty against my skin. No sound, no voice, just that sensation. Every hair on my body stood up. My whole chest seized. I did not turn around. I could not. My fingers dug into the tripod handle so hard my knuckles hurt. I whispered, "Please stop," without even planning to. That was when I heard it. A voice. Right behind my left ear. Low and close and very calm. As if whoever it was had been waiting for me to be this frightened. Before speaking, it said 2 words. "Stay still." That is it. Not a threat, not a growl, not some chant. Just stay still. In the tone of someone giving you instructions for a photograph, like a photographer telling a model not to move. But the voice was wrong. Not in its pitch or accent, but in the way it sat in the air. It did not sound like it was coming from a throat. It sounded like it was being played in my head and through the fog at the same time. Like hearing something inside and outside your skull at once. I wanted to run so badly that my muscles trembled. But that command held me there for the rest of the exposure. I felt frozen. Not by magic or anything, just by this crushing fear that if I moved before the camera stopped, something terrible would happen. I thought, if I move, I will step into one of them, bump into something I cannot see inside this fog, or I will break whatever rule I do not understand. So I stayed. Perfectly still. The tapping on stone continued its little scattered rhythm around me, like approval. Eventually, mercifully, the shutter clicked closed. The red light went off. In that split second of silence afterward, something in the air eased, like a tight band around my chest, loosening just enough for me to move. I did not look at the screen. I did not look around. I yanked the tripod legs up halfway, grabbed the whole thing with the camera still attached, and walked as fast as I could down the path toward the gate. I did not run, but it took everything I had not to. With each step, the fog around me thinned, like I was walking out of deep water. I kept my eyes locked on the dark shape of the open gate ahead, because I had this horrible feeling that if I glanced left or right, I would see shapes standing too close, inches away, staring. I could feel eyes on me, not from one direction but from every row I passed. The plastic flowers near the entrance had started clicking again in the breeze by the time I reached the gate, like the sound had been turned back on. The highway noise seeped back into my ears little by little. The sky beyond the cemetery looked slightly lighter than inside, even though it was the same night. I stepped through the gap in the gate, and only when I felt gravel change to asphalt under my shoes did I let myself look back. In that moment, the fog inside the cemetery looked almost normal again, lying low between the stones. No figures. No ring. No movement. Just cold air and stone and grass. The gate creaked slightly as I brushed it. I do not know if that sound was real or in my head. I almost dropped the tripod trying to open my car door because my hands were shaking so much. When I finally got in and slammed the door shut, the silence of the car felt like a bubble. I shoved the keys into the ignition and turned. The engine did not catch. It gave this slow, tired whine, the same way it sometimes does on cold mornings. Only this time, it did not start on the second try, or the third, or the fourth. Each time, the starter dragged longer, slower, weaker, like someone was slowly pinching off power to the whole vehicle. I could see the battery light on the dash flash once and then die. I smacked the steering wheel and said, "Come on, man, not now, not now." And I know I sound like every person in every story begging a machine, but I did. The 5th time, the engine caught, reluctantly, like it was being allowed. I did not wait. I put the car in reverse, backed away from the cemetery entrance without taking my eyes off the rearview mirror because part of me expected to see someone standing in the gate watching. There was nothing. Just the iron bars and the fog inside. I turned the car around so fast the tires skidded on loose gravel, then shot down the hill toward the main road. Only when I merged onto the highway and saw other cars, their regular red tail lights, did my breath finally come back in something like normal. I drove home on autopilot, hands locked on the wheel so tight my fingers cramped. The radio was off. I did not turn it on. I did not want any voices. I pulled into my apartment lot sometime around 7:15. I do not remember the exact minute because my vision was blurry. When I got inside, I locked the door twice, then 3 times, checked the windows, turned on every light. Only then did I take the camera off the tripod and set it on the table. For a while I just stared at it. Part of me did not want to see what I had captured. Part of me desperately needed to. Eventually, curiosity won. I popped the memory card out and slid it into my old laptop. The folder opened, rows of thumbnails showing dark rectangles with tiny lighter smudges. My hands trembled as I clicked through them. The early shots looked mostly normal. Fog, stones, lights, then the middle batch, where the first shape showed up, then the ring of them. They all looked exactly how they had on the camera screen, maybe even clearer now on the bigger display. I started to feel dizzy. When I got to the last image, the one I took after knocking the tripod, the file took longer to open. The laptop lagged for a second like it was struggling. When the picture finally appeared, my stomach lurched so hard I had to grab the edge of the table. The photo showed the main path of Willow Bend, fog thick up to chest height on all the stones, town lights a faint smear far below, and me right in the center of the frame. I was not expecting to see myself so clearly. The long exposure had blurred me a little, but you could still make out my jacket, my posture, the angle of my head. I was bent slightly forward toward the camera, hands on the tripod handles, eyes looking up. The thing is, I was not alone in the frame. Directly behind me, so close that our silhouettes almost merged, was another figure, taller, thinner. It stood perfectly upright, its head just above mine, its outline too straight. There were no details of a face, but where a face should have been, there was this pale, almost luminescent oval, slightly brighter than the fog, turned down toward me. Its arms were not quite right. They hung too long, or maybe the sleeves were wrong, or maybe there were no sleeves at all. The longer I looked, the more I could not decide what I was seeing, only that it was wrong. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the crowd behind us. In that final image, the ring of figures that had been out between the graves was gone from the distance. They were not scattered among the stones anymore. Instead, they were closer in, forming a much tighter circle around where I stood with the tripod. Maybe a dozen shapes, maybe more. It is hard to count, because they seem to overlap when you stare too long, all facing inward, all angled slightly toward me. The fog blurred their lower halves, and behind them, the graves directly in line with their bodies looked different, shifted. Some headstones that I knew had been upright were tilted or cracked in the photo, lines running down their centers like something had strained from underneath. In one corner of the frame, near the edge, you could just make out the cemetery gate. It was closed in the picture, chain pulled tight, but I knew for a fact it had been open when I walked out. That detail made my skin go ice cold. I zoomed in further, on my own face. That is when I noticed one last thing. Even though the exposure had blurred me slightly, my eyes were too sharp. They looked wide and terrified, like I was already seeing something in front of me in that moment. There was a faint reflection in my pupils, a tiny glimmer. When I zoomed in, as far as the pixels would allow, the reflection resolved into shapes, not lights from town, not stars. It looked like rows of stones and dark shapes between them reflected back at me, as if I were looking at them even though the camera was pointed that way already. It made no sense. I do not know how long I stared at that photo. Time got weird. At some point, my phone buzzed on the table and made me jump so hard I almost knocked the laptop off. It was a text from Mark asking if I had gotten my creepy graveyard shots. I typed out a joke, then deleted it, then typed, "Yeah, I got something," and left it at that. I did not send him the picture. I told myself I would sleep, look at it again in the morning, see it with fresh eyes, maybe find some normal explanation. I shut the laptop, left the camera on the table, and tried to go to bed. I did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that breath on my neck again, heard the whisper telling me to stay still. I heard faint tapping on my walls like fingers on plaster, though I know that could have been my nerves. I must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing I remember clearly is waking up to bright daylight and someone pounding on my door. My mouth tasted like metal. My clothes were still on. When I opened the door, 2 police officers were standing there. Their patrol car was parked out front, lights off, just sitting there like a regular car. The older one asked my name, asked if I was Daniel Mercer from Maple Hollow. My heart jumped into my throat. For a second I thought maybe someone had seen the pictures posted somewhere, but I had never uploaded them. Then he said something that made the floor tilt under me. He asked me if I remembered where I had been for the last 2 days. 2 days. I laughed, this weak, stupid sound, and said, "What are you talking about? I just went to sleep last night after work." He looked at me in a way I will never forget. This mix of professional, blank, and something unsure, and said, "Sir, today is Friday. You were reported missing Wednesday night when you did not show up for your Thursday shift and your supervisor could not reach you." Mark told them I had said I was going up to Willow Bend after work, so they had been checking around there. They said they had found my car parked by the cemetery gate yesterday morning. Engine cold, driver's side door closed but unlocked, tripod laying on the front seat. I started shaking my head, saying, "No, that is not right. That cannot be right." I drove home. I remember the whole drive. I even remembered what time I pulled in. They told me they had found my camera lying in the grass just inside the gate very early this morning, like it had been placed there. The older officer set a clear evidence bag on my table, and inside it was my camera, the strap twisted. I realized then that the one on my table was gone. I do not remember when it vanished. Maybe it never made it home. Maybe I just think it did. My laptop was still there. But when I flipped it open with shaky hands and tried to pull up the photos, the folder was empty. Not deleted, not corrupted. Just never there, according to the system. No file names, nothing. The officer watched me struggle with the laptop, then looked at the camera bag, then back at me. He asked if I would be willing to come down to the station and talk about where I had been, if I had blacked out, if I had been drinking, which I had not. I told him I remembered every minute from breakfast to going to bed. He kept saying Wednesday night, and I kept saying Thursday, until finally he had me look at the calendar on my phone. The date hit me like a punch. 2 days gone. Just gone. No memories, no dreams, nothing. Like my brain took that chunk and erased it. They did tests, hospital, scans, questions about seizures and substances. Everything came back normal. They chalked it up to stress, maybe a fugue state. Maybe I had parked at Willow Bend, wandered off, and someone drove my car back while I walked home in some daze. None of that explains the fog, the figures, the voice. None of that explains how the camera could be in 2 places in my memory and theirs. None of that explains why, when they showed me the pictures they pulled from the memory card for their report, there were only 3 of them. Not the whole series. Not the ring of shapes. Just 3 shots. The first was a long exposure of the empty rows. Fog, town lights. The second was that middle one with the silhouettes scattered between the stones, all a little closer than they should be. The third was the final one. The one I told you about. With me in the center and the figure standing behind me. And the tighter circle around. Only this time, there was one difference. In the copy they had, that I saw on the detective's office screen later, the figure behind me had its head tilted slightly more, almost resting where my shoulder would be. And in the very center of the crowd around us, at the spot my body occupied in the frame, There was a faint double exposure effect, like my outline was starting to blur and stretch, as if something was trying to pull me outward into their ring. When I pointed that out, the detective frowned and zoomed in, but to him, it just looked like a glitch. He printed the third photo for their file, and I watched the paper slide out of the printer. In that printed version, there was an extra detail I still cannot explain. At the bottom right corner, near the edge of the path, a new stone had appeared. It was small, low to the ground, the kind that sits flush with the grass. It was not in the digital version, not in any shot I remember. But there it was on the paper, clear as anything, and on its surface I could just make out letters. My name. Daniel Mercer. The dates under it were wrong, though. The birth year was correct. The year of death was not this year. It was next year. I grabbed the paper out of his hand before I could stop myself and stared, blinking hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. The letters did not change. The date did not blur back into nothing. I told the detective what I was seeing. He took the paper back, looked at it, looked at me, and said, "Son, that stone is not there. I do not see anything like that." To him, the corner was just grass and fog. I watched his eyes move over the exact spot and not register it. It was like being told red was not red. I asked if I could keep the print. He said no, it was part of the file. That file is probably in some drawer right now, with missing person temporarily resolved written on it. They closed my case because I was home, alive, no visible injury. Nobody cares about a worker who loses 2 days as long as he can clock back in on Monday. Ever since that night, something has been wrong with the way I see cemeteries. That is why I am sitting here by the gate of the little cemetery outside town at 3 a.m, talking into my cracked phone screen, afraid to look in the rear-view mirror. I did not mean to park here. My car battery, the one I thought I would change, has started doing this thing where it dies near burial grounds. Not in town, not at my apartment, only when I get too close to places like this. It happened last week when I took a shortcut past the churchyard on Mill Road. The engine cut for a second, then came back. The radio made this soft popping noise, like someone tapping the speaker. Tonight, I was just driving to clear my head, and the car kind of coasted here. I noticed the fuel gauge dipping faster near the cemetery. My headlights dimming just a little, like something was drawing power. I pulled over at the gate without even thinking about it. Now the engine will not turn over again. I checked the time when it died. 2:51. It is 3:04 now. I can see the headstones in my rear window if I let my eyes drift, but I am trying hard not to. The plastic flowers on the nearest one are doing that little clacking sound in the faint breeze. Every time I try to start the car, the dashboard lights flicker, and the radio whispers static, but never quite forms words. I know how this sounds, man. I know you can say it is just anxiety. It is just my brain messing up. But I have noticed something that I cannot explain away. Every time I drive past any cemetery now, any place with headstones, even ones I never noticed before, I see shapes standing between the rows. From the corner of my eye, never head-on, never clear, always just off to the side, as if they do not want to be caught fully. And each time I look directly, they are gone. But something else changes. The last time, the route I was on did not match the map in my head anymore. Streets curved slightly differently. A building that had always been there was missing, replaced by an empty lot. Little shifts, easy to blame on memory. But I know things are not lining up with how they used to be. And the dates, that is the worst of it. Sometimes when I am stopped at a light and there is a cemetery across the way, I catch myself reading headstones. I do not mean to. My eyes just pick them out. I will see a name and a pair of dates that make sense. Then, if I blink and look again, something is off. The death year will be newer, like it updated itself while I looked away. Once, I saw a stone with no second date at all, just the birth year. And when I glanced back a moment later, the death year had appeared. And it was the exact current year even though we are not through it yet. Nobody else in the car with me noticed. They just saw gray stones. I tried pointing it out to Mark when we drove past Willow Bend last month. I said, "Did you see that short stone near the gate, the one with my name?" He just laughed and told me to quit it. Said I was giving him chills for no reason. "There is no stone with your name," he said. I could see it clearly. A little marker by the edge of the path, letters sharp, plastic flowers still bright, like it had been placed recently. The date on it had changed again. Not next year anymore. The year after that. Like something was pushing the deadline back, waiting. I stopped going to funerals. When my aunt passed, I stayed outside the cemetery fence during the service, pretending I was sick. I could not make myself cross the threshold. My chest tightened up, and my vision dimmed whenever I stepped closer than a few feet from the gate. I get this crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, the exact spot where that breath touched my neck. I can feel it even now as I sit in this car. I keep thinking about that whisper on the hill. Stay still. Like I was the subject of a photograph I did not agree to. Like someone, or something, was composing around me. Moving the pieces, the figures, the stones, the fog. Closing the gate on exposures I did not understand. The worst thought, the one I cannot shake, is that the night at Willow Bend was not the horror itself, just the first click of a shutter. That there have been more exposures since, that every time I drive past a cemetery and feel the battery stutter, every time I hear plastic flowers clacking from a place I cannot see, every time I notice a date that is not what it should be, it is another frame in some series I do not have access to. I do not know how many pictures they have taken. I do not know when the last one will be. I just know I am in them. I feel it like a weight on my skin. I am telling you this now, talking into this phone, because I needed to say it out loud once before whatever is happening finishes. I am not trying to scare anyone for fun. I am tired. I am so tired. I have not slept properly since that night. Not really. When I close my eyes, I see myself from behind. Framed in that circle of shapes, all of them perfectly still. All of them waiting for some signal I cannot hear. I see that low stone with my name at the edge of the path and the date beneath it nudging forward 1 year at a time like a ticking clock only I can see. If my car starts when I finish this, I swear I will drive home and never take that hill road again. I will find routes that avoid every cemetery, every churchyard, every little patch of ground where people plant stones and plastic flowers. I will move to a place without graveyards if such a place exists. I will never point a camera at fog again. But if it does not start this time, if the battery is finally done, if I step out of this car and hear that same slow crunch of gravel behind me and that same gentle voice near my ear, if the fog that is starting to creep over the fence now rises higher and higher until it presses against my windows, I need someone to know why I stopped showing up to work. Why my car might be found sitting by a cemetery gate with the engine cold and the door unlocked and maybe a camera lying in the grass nearby. If anyone ever finds a memory card with long exposures of Willow Bend burial grounds or this little graveyard outside Maple Hollow, if you flip through and see a ring of figures getting closer in each frame, and in the last one, there is someone standing in the center wearing my jacket, do yourself a favor. Do not zoom in. Do not try to fix the levels. Do not go up there at night to check the angle. Just delete them. Turn your eyes away from any stone with your name or your year. And whatever you do, if you are standing near graves and the fog starts to rise higher than it should, and the world goes very quiet, and you hear a calm voice behind you telling you to stay still, do not listen. Move, run, break the exposure before they finish composing, because I think that is what I did wrong. I stayed still. I let them frame me, and now I do not think I will ever really step out of that circle. My name's Dylan Mercer. I'm from a little place outside Fair Ridge, Alabama, and I work as a flooring installer. I got up that day like any other, and I wish I could tell you there was something special about it, some sign, but it was just cheap cereal, coffee that tasted burned, and a leftover biscuit I ate cold over the sink while my phone charged on the counter. I remember what shirt I had on because I still have it and I still can't bring myself to throw it away. It was that dark green work shirt with my name stitched over the pocket in white thread, the one with the little streak of dried adhesive on the left sleeve that never came out no matter how many times I washed it. I checked the time when I locked my apartment door. It was 7:12 inches the morning. I remember that because I was already a little late and I sent a quick message to my buddy telling him I might miss the first coffee stop. The day itself was nothing, just measurements and hauling old carpet out of a rental house that smelled like dust and old smoke. I tore up foam underlayment, wrestled rolls of nasty carpet down a narrow hall, and listened to the same local radio station crackle through songs and ads about tire shops and auto glass. My hands smelled like latex gloves and stale carpet glue by lunch. I had a ham sandwich and a bag of chips sitting on the back of the truck, sun right in my eyes, thinking more about my paycheck than anything else. If you had walked by and told me that by 3 in the morning I'd be parked by a cemetery gate, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone, I would have laughed and told you I was too tired for jokes. After we wrapped the job around 5, my coworker, Kyle, started talking about this old church on the edge of town. He always liked doing that, trying to spin up something scary for no reason. He said, "You ever been by that old Street Hollows place out off County Line Road?" I told him I'd driven past it a couple times, because you almost have to if you live here. The church itself is this brick building with boarded windows and a leaning bell tower, and the graveyard wraps tight around it like it's hugging the walls. I always noticed it from the road. Those stones crammed in every bit of ground, some tilted, some sunk in. The whole thing pressed up against a rusted black fence. He said people went there at night, that kids from town snuck in sometimes with cameras and flashlights, trying to catch something weird for their channels. I told him I was too old to crawl around old graves like that, but he just grinned and said, "Man, you are 28 and boring. A couple of the guys are going out there after dark. You should come, just to say you did it." I said no at first. I really did. I wanted to shower and maybe heat up something in the microwave and pass out on the couch. But later that evening, after I got home and the hot water ran out halfway through, washing that glue smell off my arms, I sat on the edge of the bed and kept thinking about what he said. Part of it was pride. Part of it was just boredom. I checked my phone and there was a group chat. Kyle had added me and a couple other guys, plus this girl named Mara he knew from somewhere. He was already talking big about urban exploring and night shots and how the moon was supposed to be bright. He said, "We'll go late, like 11. Less chance of anybody caring." I stared at the messages, then at my own reflection in the dark window over the dresser, that same green shirt draped over a chair. I picked it up, sniffed it, decided it was good enough, and texted back, "Fine, I'll come. But I'm not climbing anything." Kyle replied with, "Relax, man. It's just old stones and bad paint. I swear to God, you'll be back home by 1. I ate a frozen pizza I barely tasted, half watched some show where they flipped houses and kept checking the time. By 10:30, I was pacing. It sounds stupid now, getting nervous over some late-night walk, but there was something about the idea of being in that graveyard in the dark that made my stomach feel weird. Not scared exactly, just unsettled. I left my apartment around 10:45. The sky was clear, but there was this thin haze over the town, like leftover humidity that didn't know where to go. The streets were mostly empty. I stopped for gas and a cheap coffee from the machine. Burnt and watery, but hot enough to keep me awake. I remember pulling up to the meat spot, this gravel pull-off, just before the road curves around behind Street Hollows, and seeing their cars already there. Kyle's old pickup, a silver sedan I didn't recognize, and a dark SUV. It was 11:03 when I checked my phone. The graveyard fence was just visible from where we parked, the tops of the iron bars like a row of sharp teeth against the sky. Kyle came over, hands jammed in his hoodie pockets, and bumped my shoulder. "You made it. See? Not so hard," he said. Mara was there, with a camera hanging from her neck, one of those black ones, with a big lens that made her look serious about it. Two other guys, Nate and Jordan, had little flashlights and backpacks. Everybody joked and talked louder than they needed to. Like being near the headstones made them all want to prove they weren't spooked. I tried to act normal. I drank the last of my bad coffee, shoved the empty cup into a grocery bag on the floor, and said, "So, what's the plan? Just walk around and annoy the dead?" Mara laughed a little and said, "We're just taking some shots. Long exposure stuff. Maybe some video. Calm down. It's just stone and dirt." None of us said anything about the singing. There was no singing then, just the sound of crickets and the occasional car far off on the highway. We walked down the road toward the church, staying on the narrow dirt shoulder. The fence ran along on our right side, and behind it, the churchyard was packed tight with graves. Marble, granite, rough stone, some with angels, some with just a name and dates. They were so close together, it looked like they were crowding each other for space. The church itself sat a little higher than the road, and the bell tower cut into the sky like a broken tooth. Someone said they used to ring that bell for every funeral, no matter what, but it hadn't moved in years. I kept my eyes on my feet, watching the gravel and the cracked edge of the pavement. I don't know why I remember this detail, but I do. There was this one plastic flower arrangement stuck into the ground just inside the fence, near one of the corner posts. Red plastic roses, faded to this ugly brownish pink, with dust clinging to the petals. Every time the wind moved, the stems rattled against the metal. It sounded like teeth chattering. There was a gate a little further down where the road bent toward the back of the church. It was one of those double iron gates, the kind they open for hearses. It was chained but not locked, like someone had just tied it shut out of habit more than any real need. "We're going in there?" I asked. Kyle shrugged. "We're not breaking anything. It's fine. People walk their dogs in here during the day," he said. Mara checked her camera and said, "We'll be respectful. I just want some shots of the stones and the church with that sky. Look at those clouds." I looked up and realized the haze had thickened. The moon was still there, big and pale and lopsided, but everything around it had this soft blur. It was bright enough to throw shadows, but the shadows felt wrong, stretched too far or bent the wrong way over the uneven ground. We slipped between the gate posts one by one, the chain clinking softly as we bumped it. Inside the fence, the smell changed. On the road, it was just dust, exhaust, and dry grass. Inside, it was wet earth and old cut grass, and that cold stone smell, like damp basements and rain on concrete. My boots sank a little into the ground with each step. There was dew already forming on the grass, making it glisten like it was sweating. I remember thinking about how many times people had walked this same path during daylight, holding flowers, wiping their eyes, saying quiet things to the ground. It made my chest feel tight for a second. We moved between the rows, our small flashlights painting yellow tunnels through the dark. The stones looked completely different up close, their edges sharp, their names and dates cutting into the surface. I kept catching my own shadow on them and jumping a little, angry at myself every time. Mara started taking pictures right away. The quick click and faint artificial beep of the camera kept popping in the quiet. She said, "Hold still a second," and asked Kyle to stand near one of the bigger headstones so she could get some scale. He did, posing like an idiot, hands out at his sides. It was stupid and normal, and I almost relaxed. Then I heard that first note. It was so soft at first, I thought it was just wind in the bell tower, or the distant radio of some car on the highway. A low sound, stretched out, rising and falling just enough to feel like a human throat was doing the work. I stopped walking without meaning to, my foot halfway over a sunken patch of ground, and I listened. It came again. Not a word you could pick out. Not at that distance. Just a sound with shape and intention. A melody, old, slow, like something they would play in a church, with stained glass and wooden pews that creak when people sit down. "Do you hear that?" I said. Kyle turned his head. Nate laughed and said, "Man, don't start already." Mara lowered her camera, her face suddenly serious. "No. Wait," she said. "Listen." The others fell quiet. Our little flashlights buzzed faintly. The crickets seemed to pull back, like the sound of them got thinner. That voice, if you want to call it that, grew clearer. It was humming, not singing words. A hymn or something like one. You know those songs that sound like they're about peace, but they make your neck prickle because you can hear funerals and slow walks and people trying not to cry behind the tune? It was like that. It came from somewhere near the old church building, not from inside the tower, not from any one window. It sounded like it was rising from the ground itself, right where the choir would have stood if the church were still open. "Maybe somebody left a radio in there," Jordan said, but his voice wobbled. "Or somebody's messing with us." I wanted it to be that. I really did. I wanted to see some kid with a speaker and a phone hiding behind a grave, giggling at how clever he was. I raised my flashlight and shined it toward the church, but the beam cut off against the dark bricks and the boarded windows. The humming went on, unwavering, as calm as if the person doing it had been standing there for hours, not even running out of breath. "We should go closer," Mara said. "No way," I answered. Just like that. It just came out. "We came all the way here," Kyle said. "I swear to God, if it's just some old speaker, I'm not leaving until I see it. Come on, man. We'll just go to the edge." Against my better judgment, I followed them. That's the part that eats at me. I could have turned around. I could have stepped back through that gate and gone home and gone to bed, and this would just be some dumb story about the night I chickened out. But I walked right along with them, weaving between stones worn so smooth by time and weather that you could hardly read them. We passed one, with the date worn off. Just a last name, the letters chipped in a way that made them look like they were melting. There was another, with plastic flowers that were newer, bright purple and green, the stems jammed deep into the soil. The air around those felt colder. The humming grew louder as we approached the side of the church. It held the same pattern over and over, like the person humming only remembered that one line of the song and never moved on from it. No breaths, no breaks, just that low rise and fall going under my skin. "This is stupid," Nate muttered. "This is so stupid." "You can wait by the gate," Mara said, but even she sounded forced now. We stopped when we reached the path that cut between the closest row of headstones and the side wall of the church. The ground there was uneven and sloped slightly toward the building, like everything was being pulled in that direction. There was a small door in the wall, half-rotted wood with peeling white paint and a crooked handle. It was the kind of door that might have led to a side entrance or a storage area. It was swollen shut, and boards were nailed over it anyway. No light came from the cracks. The sound, though, was right there. It was like standing next to a speaker at low volume, every note vibrating just enough in the air that you could feel it in your chest. Only there was nothing playing, nothing you could see. "It's coming from under us," I said. It hit me all at once. I don't know how I knew, but I did. It wasn't in the church. It was under the ground, under the foundation, like someone was standing in a room or a pit beneath the choir, humming up through the stone and dirt. "Choir pit," Mara whispered. "Some old churches had those, right? Spaces under the front area?" Nobody answered her. Kyle raised his flashlight and swept it slowly along the wall, then down over the grass at our feet. "We should record this," he said. "Get a clip, then we can go." "We should leave," I said again, but quieter this time. My mouth was dry. My hands felt too big, like I didn't know where to put them. Mara was already lifting her camera, focusing on the dark windows above, the line of the roof against the sky. "Just hold still a second," she said. "If I do a longer exposure, I might catch where the sound is bouncing, like some reflection." Her words didn't even make full sense, but but I could tell she was trying to sound like she knew what she was doing so she wouldn't lose her nerve. The humming shifted. It didn't change tune or speed, but something about it bent. Like the person humming turned their head or moved a step closer to where we were. It vibrated differently in my chest. Higher up near my throat, I swallowed and tasted metal. Man, I swear to God, if this is you with a Bluetooth speaker, I'm going to be mad later, Nate said. He directed that at Kyle, but nobody laughed. Kyle said, "It's not me," and his voice was almost too soft to hear. That was when the noise stopped. No fading, no trailing off, just a hard cut, like someone pressed a button in the air above us. 1 second, there was this low, steady humming, and the next, there was nothing. Not even crickets. Not the highway. Not the little clicks of Mara's camera. My ears rang. The silence was deep enough it almost hurt. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs burned and I had to suck in air. And when I did, it felt cold and heavy, like it didn't want to go all the way down. "Okay, that's it," I said. "We're done. We heard your church song, or whatever that was. Time to go." I turned, intending to step back the way we had come, and saw her standing between us and the nearest row of headstones. She wasn't there a heartbeat before. I know that because I had just looked that way, eyes sweeping past the stones, the road, the fence, making sure we were still alone. I would have seen anybody walking up. This woman just existed there all at once, like the air decided it was tired of being empty in that shape and filled it with her. She was wearing what looked like a choir robe, but not the clean kind from church postcards. It was shredded at the hem and sleeves, torn in long strips that hung and fluttered a little even though the air around us was still. The fabric was a dull, dusty white that might have once been bright. It clung to her shoulders and chest like it was wet, but there was no shine to it. Her hair was long and dark and pulled back in some simple way, but the back of it looked wrong, like part of it was sticking to something just out of sight. I could not see her face clearly. That is the part that I keep trying to explain and nobody understands. It wasn't blurred or covered. It was just never where my eyes thought it would be. I would look straight at her and my gaze would slide off, catching the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek, the hollow at her throat, but never the full picture. My brain kept telling me if I just tried a little harder, I would see. But every time I focused, something in my head would stutter and skip. Her feet did not touch the ground. I know how that sounds, like some cheap scare story, but that's exactly what I saw. The hem of that shredded robe hung a few inches above the damp grass. There were no shoes, no bare skin, nothing under the cloth except air. And yet, there she was, the weight of her presence pressing on the space in front of us. Nobody moved. It felt like someone had glued me to the earth. My fingers dug into my palms so hard I left little half-moons there, but I didn't feel it in that moment. "Do you see her?" I whispered, because I had to know if this was just my mind breaking. "Tell me you see her." Mara made a small sound, like a breath that caught halfway out. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I see her." Kyle took a step backward without meaning to. His boot hit a loose bit of stone, and it rolled, making this tiny grinding noise that sounded huge in the absence of everything else. The woman's head turned toward him, slow and smooth, that not quite visible face tracking his movement. She did not blink. At least, I never saw her do it. "We're leaving," Nate said. His voice was high and thin. "We should not be here." He tried to turn sideways, but his legs barely obeyed. The woman didn't lunge or reach or do any of the things people always say in stories. She just drifted. That's the only word I have for it. Her body moved forward without any visible effort, her robe shifting around her like it was underwater. She passed between two headstones without disturbing the grass, closing the distance between us at this slow, steady pace that was somehow worse than if she had rushed. If she had rushed, I might have run. Instead, I stood there watching her come closer and closer. my body frozen in some old instinct that said if I stayed still enough, maybe I would disappear from her notice. Mara snapped a picture. I heard the shutter click, and it sounded like someone breaking a rule. The flash did not fire. There was no burst of light. The camera made its sound, but the night didn't respond the way it should have. The woman stopped. She was only a few feet away now. I could see the texture of the robe, the way the threads frayed at the edges, the places where it was worn thin. I could almost make out the shape of her collarbones beneath the fabric. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I would fall over. "Ma'am," Jordan said suddenly, like he was talking to a lost person in a parking lot. "We are sorry. We didn't mean to bother you." "We'll go." The woman's head turned toward him next. The air around us got heavier. It felt like being underwater, like every movement took twice the effort. My ears popped, and for a second I thought I heard that humming again. But not from her mouth, from somewhere deeper, like it was echoing inside my own chest. Then, as if a switch was thrown, she pivoted. She turned her back to us, the shredded hem of her robe swaying slightly, and started moving away, not out toward the road, not toward the gate. She glided along a narrow path between the older graves, heading toward the shadowed side of the church where we had not walked yet. "That's our sign," I said. I wanted to run the other way, but my feet tracked after her, just like everyone else's. That is the part I hate admitting. We followed her. We didn't talk about it. We didn't agree. We just fell in behind, like kids in a slow, miserable parade. The distance between us stayed the same, no matter how fast or slow we tried to move. She never looked back. But I knew, absolutely knew, that if one of us broke away, she would know, and that head would turn, and I would see the face I couldn't see, and I would not be able to stand it. We came around the back corner of the church, where the ground dipped down a little and the graves crowded even closer. The stones here were older, shorter, some barely more than rough markers sticking up from the earth. My flashlight beam shook as I tried to keep it on the ground so I wouldn't trip. The woman passed through a patch of those plastic flowers, the stems rattling that teeth chatter sound again, and didn't disturb a single one. She brought us to a stop near what looked like a slightly raised patch of earth. Not a fresh grave, nothing that obvious, just a rectangle of ground that seemed more defined than the rest. At the head of it, there was a stone. Not tall, not fancy, just a simple slab with a polished front. I had never seen it before in my life, and somehow I knew exactly what it would say. The woman stopped there, floating just to the side of it. She angled her body a little so we could see. "No," I said. It came out of me from somewhere low and terrified. I didn't want to look, but my eyes dragged up from the grass anyway, following the dark line of the stone, the little chips on its side, the way moisture clung to its base. The name on it was mine, first and last, the letters carved deep and clean. Below that, the date of birth was correct. Month, day, year. There was another date, too. Not some time far away. Not some distant old age I hadn't reached. It was the day we were standing there. The exact date. Freshly cut into stone with sharp edges, as if the chisel marks were still cooling. "Is that a joke?" Kyle said. His voice broke on the last word. He stepped sideways, looking at the next stone. That one had his name, first and last. His birthday. The same final date. Nate stumbled to another stone. His flashlight beam swung wild, catching carvings, moss, little pools of water in low spots. Every stone around us, in that tight little cluster behind the church, had one of our names. You ever seen your own name in a place it isn't supposed to be? On a form you never filled out, in a file you never made. Your brain stalls. Mine did. Part of me kept thinking someone had access to our IDs, our social media, whatever, and had pulled some elaborate trick. But the stone was cold when I reached out and touched it, and the grooves of my name were real under my fingers. "This is not funny, man," Jordan said. "Who came out here and carved this?" Nobody answered. There was nobody to answer. The woman in the robe stood there, tilting her head slightly like she was listening for something. Mara raised her camera again, hands shaking so hard I could hear the strap rattling. "I need proof," she said. "I need to know this is not just my brain freaking out." She snapped photo after photo, the shutter clicking quick and frantic. The flash still did not fire. The screen on the back of the camera glowed faintly. "Show me," I said. "Show me the pictures." She didn't answer at first. She scrolled through them, thumb moving in jerks. Her breathing got louder. Finally, she turned the camera so we could see. Every image showed the graveyard, the stones, the church wall, the empty ground where we stood. But in each one, those stones at the back had names on them, our names. And in the last few, the ones she had just taken, something else had changed. The dates on the stones were not all the same anymore. Mine still showed that day. Kyle's showed 1 a week from then. Nate's was 3 days away. Jordan's and Mara's were different too, spaced out over some invisible schedule. It was like someone had decided on an order. "This doesn't make sense," Mara whispered. "I just took these. I swear to God, I just took these. And the dates were all the same in person. Look at them." I turned back to my stone. The date had not changed. Still that day. The woman moved then. For the first time since we saw her, she stepped, or whatever you want to call what she did, closer to me. The space between us shrank until I could smell something. It wasn't decay or smoke or anything dramatic. It was just old air. Air that had been shut in a place with stone walls and no windows. Dry, stale, a little sweet around the edges. Like forgotten flowers. She leaned slightly. The knot face of hers tilted in my direction. I felt this pressure behind my eyes. Like tears were trying to come and couldn't. My vision blurred at the edges. I thought I heard that humming again, but softer, right in my ear, like she was reminding me of something I had never known. "We have to go," I said. "Now, I mean it." I grabbed Kyle's sleeve and yanked. The spell, if you want to call it that, broke for him. He stumbled, nearly falling into the next row of stones, and swore under his breath, catching himself. Nate turned away from his own grave, hands shaking. "Run," he said. There was no courage in it. Just survival. Just run. We did. We didn't talk about staying together or holding hands or any of that. We just turned our backs on those stones and that woman, and we ran. The ground fought us. Every step felt heavier. The grass clinging to our boots. The earth sucking at our souls like mud, even though it had been dry all day. My breath roared in my ears. I glanced back once, against every instinct screaming at me not to. She was still there, standing in the cluster of our stones, watching, or whatever passed for watching. She did not chase us. She didn't have to. That was the worst part. If she had chased, if she had screamed or flown over the graves, it would have turned it into a different kind of nightmare, one with a clear villain and a clear escape. Instead, she stayed. And I knew without anyone telling me that the distance didn't matter. That I could run all the way home, and she would still be as close as she needed to be whenever that last date came due. We burst out through the gate in a ragged line. The chain rattled against the metal post with a sharp clang that echoed down the empty road. The night sounds rushed back all at once. Crickets, far-off traffic, the distant bark of a dog. It was like the world had remembered how to be normal as soon as we left the boundary of the graveyard. I bent over, hands on my knees, gulping air that finally felt like it would reach all the way into my lungs. My chest hurt. My legs shook. "Did you see that?" Kyle gasped. His eyes were wide, whites showing all around the iris. "Tell me I didn't imagine that. Tell me you all saw the stones." "We saw them," Mara said. She was staring at her camera like it was a bomb that might go off. "We all saw them." Nate leaned against the side of his car, sliding down until he was sitting on the gravel. He pressed his palms to his forehead. "I'm not going back in there," he said. "I don't care what happens. I am never going back in there." We argued in broken sentences about what to do next. Call someone? Who do you call for something like that? The police? What would we say? Hello, officer. The graves behind street. Hollows are predicting our deaths. Nobody would believe us. A priest? The place hadn't had one in decades. The county? The town council? I could already see their faces in my mind, polite and tired, thinking we were drunk or looking for attention. We delete the photos, Jordan said suddenly. If we erase them, maybe it breaks whatever this is. Mara hugged the camera closer to her chest. If we erase them, then nobody will ever believe us, and I will start thinking I imagined everything, she said. I need something solid. She scrolled through them again with trembling fingers. Besides, what if deleting them makes it worse? The idea of that made my stomach twist. Like we'd be destroying some kind of warning. The dates. The order. I want to go home, I said. That was all I knew for sure. I want to go home right now. We can talk about this tomorrow in the daylight. I'll come by your place. We'll look at the pictures. We'll figure something out. The others agreed. Not because it was a good plan, but because it was the only one that didn't involve going back under that bell tower. We got into our cars. My hands shook on the steering wheel so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. When the engine finally turned over, the sound was the best thing I had ever heard. I checked my phone. It was 12:41, less than 2 hours since we had parked. It felt like a whole different lifetime. On the drive home, I took the long way. I went out toward the highway, then back in on a different road, even though it added 10 minutes. I refused to pass any cemetery, any cluster of headstones, even the little family plots some people have in their yards out here. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door twice and shoved a chair under the doorknob like that would help. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. It smelled like the same old tap water as always. But for a second, when I looked up and met my eyes in the mirror, I thought I saw the shape of that robe standing behind me over my shoulder, just for the length of a blink. When I turned, there was nothing there. I didn't sleep. I lay on the bed in my clothes with the lamp on, staring at the ceiling, listening to every little creak of the building like it was a footstep on gravel. My mind kept replaying the same loop, the woman appearing, the grave with my name, the date, her drifting away, leading us like we were the ones out of place. The next day, I went to work. That sounds insane, I know. But what else was I supposed to do? Stay home and stare at the wall. I carried laminate planks and cut trim and tried to talk about football with the guy on the crew who hadn't been there last night. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Around lunch, I checked it and saw messages from the group chat. Mara had sent a picture. Not from the graveyard, from her kitchen table. It showed her camera, lying there next to a notebook. She wrote, "All the shots from last night are there." I backed them up to my laptop. Dates are the same as we saw at the end. I don't know what to do. Under that, Kyle had written, "We don't do anything. We leave it alone. We just live our lives and pretend we never went out there." Nate wrote, "Easy for you to say. Yours is a week out." He followed that with, "Mine is tomorrow." Tomorrow? How am I supposed to pretend about that? My stomach dropped. I had tried not to think about the spacing of the dates, tried not to line them up with my own calendar. Seeing it there in plain text brought it back into focus. Mine was that night. I looked at the clock on my phone. It was 12:26. I had a little more than half a day left if the stone was telling the truth. Or maybe that was all nonsense and I was just feeding a fear that had no purpose. People do not get their end dates carved before they die. That is not how the world works. I told myself that over and over. At 3 in the afternoon, my boss said I could go home early since we had wrapped the job faster than he thought. Normally, I would have been happy. That day, it just meant more hours alone with my head. I forced myself to stop by a grocery store on the way back, to walk under those bright fluorescent lights like a regular person shopping for regular things, just to prove I could. I picked up bread, some deli meat, a bag of chips I didn't want. Everyone there looked normal. There were kids begging for candy near the register, An old man arguing about a coupon. A woman scanning items with bored eyes. None of them had any idea that I was counting the hours like they were drops of water in a leaking bucket. I drove home with the radio on loud. One song after another. The DJ's voice cutting in with jokes and weather updates that sounded like they were broadcasting from another universe. When I pulled into my apartment lot, it was just starting to get dark. The sky had that deep blue shade that happens before full night, and for a second, it reminded me of the way the graveyard had looked just before we heard the humming. I parked under a flickering light and sat there. I should have gone inside, locked the door. I should have done anything except what I did. At 6:17, my phone rang. It was a number I recognized, Mara. I answered on the second ring. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded rough in my own ears. "Are you okay?" She didn't waste time. "Nate is not answering," she said. "He said he was going to stay with his cousin today, that he didn't want to be alone." I tried his cell. No answer. I tried his cousin's landline. No answer. Kyle says we're overreacting, but he also keeps asking what time the stone said. The back of my neck went cold. "Maybe they went somewhere," I said. "Maybe they turned their phones off." "Maybe," she said, but there was no belief in it. "Listen, Dylan, something else happened." Her voice dropped lower. I checked the photos again. My date changed. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean changed?" "It moved," she said. "It was next week. Now it's sooner." She paused, and I could hear her breathing. "It's tonight. Same as yours." The world outside my windshield felt like it had pulled back, like everything was suddenly too far away. The cars, the trees, the building, all of it going fuzzy at the edges while the sound of my own heartbeat got louder. "Maybe it's just the file metadata," I said, grasping at anything. "Maybe your camera is messed up." "The stone changed too," she whispered. "I went back out there this afternoon. I know you told me not to, but I had to see. The dates on the actual stones had moved. Yours didn't. Mine did. Nate's did not." I didn't want to know what that meant. I knew anyway. "Nate was first. We have to do something," I said. "We can't just sit here waiting for it." "What do you want to do?" she asked. "Go to the hospital and sit in the waiting area, hoping nothing happens. Go to the police and tell them a grave gave us a timetable." I didn't have an answer. I thought about driving somewhere busy, somewhere full of people. A mall, a movie theater. Like being surrounded by strangers would make us safe. Then I remembered the way the woman had stood there among the stones, how the air had bent around her. I had this sick feeling that it wouldn't matter where we were when the time came. The place was already picked. "I'm going back out there," Mara said suddenly. "No," I said. "Listen, that's not smart." "I can't sit here," she said. "If this is real, if this is what it looks like, we're marked whether we act or not. I'd rather be looking at it than waiting for it to sneak up on me." I thought she was talking herself into something reckless, but part of me understood. Sitting in my car, gripping the wheel so hard my fingers hurt, I realized I was just as trapped. "I'll meet you there," I said before I could stop myself. "We can at least be together." "Okay," she said. "Half an hour?" I checked the time. 6:22. "Yeah," I said. "Half an hour." I hung up, sat there for a full minute, staring at nothing, then turned the key. The engine caught. I pulled out and headed back toward County Line Road like someone else was steering for me. The sky was almost black when I got close. The outline of the church and its crowded graveyard rose up out of the darkness like they had been waiting exactly for this moment. My headlights swept along the fence, catching the tops of headstones like teeth again. I pulled into the same gravel pull-off as the night before. Mara's car was already there. So was Kyle's truck. I parked next to them and killed the engine. For a second, the sudden silence felt like a fist around my throat. Then, I saw movement near the fence. It was just Kyle, pacing, rubbing his hands over his face. Mara stood a little further down, near the gate, her camera hanging around her neck again. I got out and walked over, every step feeling like it might be my last. "You came," Mara said. It sounded like she hadn't fully expected that. "I said I would," I answered. Kyle shook his head. "You two are out of your minds," he said. But he stayed, which told me enough. He could have left, but he didn't. "Where's Nate?" I asked. Nobody answered. The gate creaked when we opened it. No chain this time. Just the soft sound of metal moving metal. Inside, the smell hit me again. Damp, old, heavy. The air pressed in close. We moved between the stones, not bothering with small talk. The moon was higher, the same dull light casting stretched shadows across the markers. No humming. Not yet. Just the sound of our feet and our breathing. We went straight to the back cluster, where our names had been. I didn't want to, but my legs knew the way. That's how it felt. Like whatever path had opened up the night before was still there. Invisible, but real. Guiding us. When we reached it, I stopped short. There were only 4 stones now. Mine, Mara's, Kyle's, Jordan's. Nate's stone was gone. The ground where it had been was disturbed, like someone had dragged something heavy across it. Not dug up, not filled in, just scraped over, smoothed in a hurry. "This is not happening," Kyle whispered. "This is not happening." Mara lifted her camera and, without a word, took another picture of the stones. The flash finally went off this time. A harsh white burst that lit the whole little patch for a split second. When the afterimage faded from my eyes, I saw her staring down at the camera screen, eyes wide. "Well?" I asked. I hated how desperate I sounded. "They match," she said. "The dates match what's on the stone. Yours is tonight. Mine is tonight. The others are still spaced out." She swallowed. "Nate's is gone. Both here and in the photos." I realized then that the humming had started again. Very low. Barely there. A single note stretched just longer than it should last. Then another, stacking into that same old tune. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The woman was not visible yet, but I knew, with a horrible certainty, that we were not alone. "We should go," Kyle said. His voice was shaking. "Right now. We should just go and keep driving until the gas runs out." "And then what?" I said. "You really think we can outrun dates carved in stone?" "I don't know," he said. "I just know I don't want to stand here waiting." The humming grew louder, closer. This time, it felt like it was coming not just from under the church, but from under every grave around us, like the ground itself had learned the song. My knees felt weak. I looked at my stone again, at my own name, at the cold numbers below. It was like staring at an appointment I had no way to cancel. "Maybe we were never supposed to see this," Mara said softly. "Maybe this is just how it always is, and we just bumped into it by accident. Names, dates, orders. Maybe it's everywhere, and we only saw because we were stupid enough to come here at the wrong time." "That doesn't help," I said. "I'm not trying to help," she said. "I'm just trying to understand." The humming stopped. The silence hit just like before. My heart hammered in my chest, waiting for her to appear. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. The night stayed still. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound made me jump so hard I almost dropped my flashlight. I fumbled it out and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing made me swipe to answer. "Hello," I said. Static. For a moment, just static. Then underneath it, faint and thin, that same hymn, humming through the speaker. Not loud, not clear, just enough to recognize. "Who is this?" I said. My voice broke in the middle. There was no response. The humming continued. It did not come from around us. Now, it came from the phone pressed to my ear. From that tiny speaker. My name played through my head over the sound, like the stone was whispering it. I hung up, hand shaking. The moment the call ended, the humming in the air around us cut off too, like they had been linked. My phone buzzed again immediately. Same number. I didn't answer. The screen lit up, the device trembling in my hand. The others watched me, their own faces pale in the weak light. "What is it?" Mara asked. "Nothing good," I said. My voice was flat. The call went to mist. After a few seconds, my phone chimed with a new notification. A picture. My stomach clenched. I opened it. It was a photo of the graveyard from the night before, taken from somewhere above us. The angle wrong, like a camera had been mounted in the sky. I could see the four of us from last night, small and pale against the dark grass, standing in that same cluster of stones. In the picture, the woman in the robe was not where I remembered her. She was behind us, one hand raised, pointing past us, toward the road, toward the gate, toward the world beyond. "What is it?" Mara repeated. I handed her the phone with fingers that barely obeyed. She looked. Her breath hitched. Kyle leaned in, swore softly under his breath. "Who took that?" he asked. Nobody answered because nobody could. The buzzing started again. Call after call, the same unknown number filling my screen, backing up behind my refusal to pick up. The sound of the vibration rattled in my hand like a trapped insect. "Turn it off," Kyle said. "Just turn it off." I powered the phone down. The screen went black. The buzzing stopped. For a second, I felt like I could breathe again. Then, from somewhere behind us, closer to the church wall, the humming started up once more, louder than it had ever been. We turned as one. She was there, near the old side door, standing half in shadow, robe hanging in strips, feet not touching the ground. This time, something about her shape seemed sharper, more defined. Like the longer we looked, the more real she became and the less we did. "What do you want?" I said. "I don't know why," I asked. It felt better than standing there in silence. She didn't answer with words. The humming didn't break. She lifted one arm slowly, sleeve sliding back enough that I could almost see the outline of fingers underneath, and pointed. Not at us. At the stones behind us. Our stones. Then she lowered her arm, turned, and began drifting away again. Not toward the graves this time, but along a narrow path that led to a gate I hadn't noticed before. Half hidden behind an overgrown hedge. It was a small iron gate in the back fence, leading out to the woods beyond the churchyard. "She's leading us again," Mara whispered. "Just like you said. Not chasing. Leading." "I'm not going," Kyle said. He took a step back. "I am not doing this a second time. I'm done." I wanted to agree. Every part of me wanted to stick to the ground and let her disappear into the dark, pretend I had never seen that out gate. But my feet moved anyway, pulling me forward. I think some part of me believed that if we followed, we might get an answer. Maybe a bargain. Maybe a way to cancel those dates. We trailed her along the path, between more stones, over ground that felt thinner, like the layer between us and whatever was underneath was worn down. The air cooled with every step until I could see my breath in front of me. Pale little clouds that vanished quickly into the dark. The humming wrapped around us, filling my ears, vibrating in my teeth. When we reached the small gate, it swung open on its own, just wide enough for one person at a time. Beyond it, the trees crowded in, a narrow trail disappearing into the shadows. The woman passed through without touching the metal. She did not look back. I stood there, right at the threshold, and for the first time that night, I stopped moving. "No," I said. "I'm not going with you there. It's bad enough in here." Mara paused beside me. Kyle stayed several feet back, near the last row of stones, breathing hard. "What if this is the only way?" Mara asked. What if this is how we break it? Or, what if this is exactly what she wants? I shot back. What if the whole point is for us to walk where we're not supposed to go? We hesitated for what felt like a long time. The humming was fainter now. Further down the trail, the woman's shape grew harder to see between the trunks. Finally, the sound faded, not cutting off like before, just thinning until it was gone. The air warmed a fraction. The gate stood open, empty. We're not going through, I said. We are not going through. Neither of them argued. We backed away, careful not to turn our backs completely, until we were back among the more familiar rows. When we finally reached our stones again, something in me loosened a little. We hadn't stepped off whatever path kept us in the human part of that ground. If there was a line, we'd stayed on our side. What if that was the test? Mara said. What if going through would have been worse? Or what if we failed something by not going? I don't care, I said. If my time is tonight, it can come find me out on the road. I am not walking into those trees. We left then. We didn't run like the first time. We walked fast, like people leaving a bad argument. Every few seconds, I checked over my shoulder, expecting to see her gliding along behind us. She never appeared. The humming did not return. It was just us and the crunch of our footsteps. Back at the cars, we stood in a loose circle, not looking at each other straight on. What do we do now? Kyle asked. It might have been the first honest question all night. We go home, I said. We lock our doors. We wait. If morning comes and we're still here, we figure out the next step. And if it doesn't, he said. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We all knew. We got in our cars. We drove away from the church and the graves and the woman who never had to hurry. I took the long way again, avoiding every cemetery I could. When I finally pulled into my apartment lot, my hands were so numb I could barely take the key out of the ignition. It was just before midnight. I sat there for a long time, watching the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. 12:01, 12:10, 12:23. Every time a headlight passed on the road, I flinched. At some point, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers were cramping. I forced myself to let go, to breathe, to open the door. I went inside, locked everything up, and sat down on the edge of my bed, green work shirt still on my back. My phone lay on the nightstand, still powered down. I stared at it. I didn't want to know if there were more calls, more pictures, more humming. I didn't want to open the door any wider than it already was. I must have drifted for a few minutes, not sleeping, just floating in that sick, half-awake state where your thoughts spin and spin. Then there was a sound. Soft, rhythmic, coming from outside my window. At first, I thought it was wind in the branches, a regular sway. Then it shifted, and I realized it wasn't wind. It was humming. That same low, old tune, coming from somewhere just beyond the glass. I stayed perfectly still. I did not get up. I did not pull back the curtain. I didn't want to see, because I already knew what would be there if I looked. A figure in shredded white, feet not quite touching the ground, waiting, leading, not chasing. The sound went on, rising and falling like a heartbeat I couldn't slow. I sat there until my legs went numb and my back hurt and the clock crept past the time carved on my stone. At some point, the humming stopped. The air in the room eased. The next thing I remember clearly is light seeping around the edges of the curtains. Morning. I was still there. Alive. As far as I could tell. Heart beating, lungs working, hands able to move. I turned my phone on with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. No missed calls. No new pictures. The only message was from Kyle, sent at 3 a.m. It said, "I can't sleep. Do you hear anything? Are you okay?" Mara never wrote. I called both of them. Kyle picked up on the second ring, voice raw. He had heard humming too, he said. From his hallway. From under his floor. It had stopped just after the time on his stone. Mara did not answer. She didn't answer that day, or the next. A week later, word went around that there had been an accident near the woods behind the old church. They said a hiker slipped, hit her head, fell into one of those old sinkholes that open up around roots and rocks out there. It was tragic, but things like that happen. People shook their heads, brought casseroles, said they always meant to put up better warning signs along those trails. I went out there once, in broad daylight, not to the churchyard, but to the edge of the woods from the other side. I could see the trees where that back gate would open if you came through the cemetery. Standing there, listening to the wind move through the branches, I thought I heard a note of humming buried under the rustle. I turned around and went home. I haven't walked past a cemetery since. I cross the street if I see a fence with stones behind it. If I can't avoid it, if the road forces me to drive by, I turn the radio up as loud as it will go and stare straight ahead, refusing to look at the names, the dates, the flowers, all those numbers lining up in ways we are not meant to see. I still get calls from unknown numbers sometimes, late at night. I don't answer them. I let them ring until they stop and my pulse slows back down. I haven't been back to Street Hollows. I won't. I know what is waiting there. It isn't the woman, not really. It's something older, something that keeps schedules and orders and quiet songs for the ones who stand too close to the line between the living and the dead. I'm still here for now, but I know, deep down, that the stone with my name on it is still there, behind that church, waiting. Maybe the date will move again. Maybe it won't. Maybe that night was just a notice, a polite reminder carved in rock. All I know is I saw it once. That's enough. I am telling you this, sitting in my car outside another cemetery, because it was the only place I could bring myself to talk. The streetlights don't quite reach the fence. The headstones are just shapes in the dark. I can't hear humming right now. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. Somewhere under the grass, under the stone, under the bones. If you ever feel curious enough to walk among the graves at night, if someone invites you to go take pictures or explore or prove you're not scared, remember what I'm telling you. They don't have to chase you. They don't have to grab you. All they have to do is lead you. And somewhere, beyond the reach of your headlights, there might already be a stone with your name on it, waiting for you to finally look.